Hello and welcome to another episode of A Bazaar podcast. As per usual, you can find us on YouTube as well as on Spotify and Apple Podcasts or via RSS feed for your favorite podcast listening app of choice. I'm the first of your hosts, MetallFenix. I am currently fighting a somewhat intense battle with the bubonic plague. Yes, it's back. I blame the dinosaurs. We'll get into that later. So if I sound a little bit hoarse or am a little bit quiet, you know why. Thankfully, I've got a great crowd with me to pick up my slack, starting off with first of my co-hosts, Sixten.
Yes, I'm Sixten, the dually enjoyer, checking in.
And we've got Walter as well.
Well, I'm embracing my villain role. I'm a blank slate Walter with the sapphire in hand, and yeah, I'm ready to be the bad guy on today's podcast.
And finally, returning guest and overall wonderful person, we've got Retromation once again. Why don't you do a bit of a reintroduction, just in case there's anyone listening who hasn't heard of you before?
My name is Retromation. I am 6'7" and ripped. I do YouTube and play the Bazaar and some indie games and stuff, but a lot of Bazaar.
Awesome.
And that's
Let's get right into it. We usually have the guest of the week start off, so why don't you also tell us a bit about what have you been playing?
You know, they released some new items in the video game. I played a lot of those new items. I'd say I played all the characters, but definitely like the patch hasn't been out that long at this point, and most of my time has been spent on either Dually or Mac to kind of play around and get a hold of the new items.
And speaking
But
of the patch, I forgot to mention, I might as well get that in there. We are recording this at about 6:30 European time zone on the Monday. I'll probably get this episode up later tonight, but based on what we know, it's fairly likely that a hotfix may or may not be deployed sometime during the recording of this episode. So, for anyone who might be listening to this, especially in a day or two from now, if anything doesn't 1,000% add up, it's probably because of that, but we'll try to keep it in mind as we go and discuss things on a bit more of like a macro level in a way that hopefully
hey,
won't be disrupted too much.
yeah, if anything I say is like doesn't sound good or right at any point in this entire podcast, it was hot fixed. I promise.
Yeah, like anything.
Everything, anything, and any take I have on food, anything, it was hot fixed.
Yeah,
Just don't worry about it.
definitely. There was a correct opinion at the time of recording. It's not our
Yes,
fault, guys.
everything I say is correct at the time that I say it until a couple seconds later it was hot fixed.
But yeah, I think we've
But,
we've
yeah.
all kind of been enjoying the respective expansions, although it's slightly different which of them each of us have been playing. But why don't you start off with kind of, we'll probably talk more about the meta later, but
Yeah.
what's been your overall first impressions of the two expansions?
It's so hard to have that because they've been through multiple versions already. Like literally whichever day we recorded this on, I would have to give you different answers. But I would say like I think the dinos in general do feel like a strong thing for Dooley. I think that him having access to, I mean, the out of combat scaling is very, very good. Destruction is always good. Like, it's, I think I talked to Sixten about it before they were released. How it's like, oh, dinos are gonna make people upset when they become not niche. Like, this is just a mechanic that's going to upset people when it becomes an archetype that you're supposed to do instead of this weird niche thing. And I do think that's true.
Yeah, I would
But
almost liken the dinosaurs to from traditional card games, and I'm sure those of you who've played those might have opinions on this analog, but they feel very similar to the concept of hand disruption, which is notoriously one of the most hated mechanics by many players, especially those who like to play combo-centric playstyles. But it also very frequently ends up existing as kind of this key balancing lever where I feel like historically throughout the lifespan of the Bazaar, there's been relatively few times. I can think of a few, like Shot Glasses Proboscis Vanessa or like Square Pig, but there have been relatively few boards that don't care too much about their independent pieces. That's why Void Golem was considered arguably the most difficult PvE encounter in the entire game. So it might add an interesting dynamic where now the boards the best against dinos are boards that historically haven't really been making it to the very top of things, whereas many of the boards the most vulnerable to dinos might be boards that historically have been very prevalent and powerful.
Yeah, and also just like a way that the dinos got hotfixed changed boards that are good against it as well. Like in the past, Mamasaur or Diana could like keep on eating smalls as long as you had a lot of things. So therefore, really, really wide boards with lots of small items were bad because like you would just keep on feeding them. But now in this case, like having a board with like only smalls per se, like they often dino destruction will like at the best of times probably destroy 3 things. They'll do that very consistently, but so like a wide board of small stuff, only losing, 30% of their board instead of like all like mediums and a small losing like whatever 50-60% or something if with the right hits or whatever. But I mean, I played some of that. I'm not gonna lie. I've done some dino stuff. I did the hydraulic press stuff. The new card that wasn't in the expansion, just like the new card that got added.
Can I jump in and say, in your video for hydraulic press, you accidentally use the exploit and then say it doesn't work, and then miss the entire time that your hydraulic press is a loot from a cinder that doesn't get eaten. It's very. I was like screaming at the TV.
I know. I didn't. Well, because like it wasn't supposed to work that way.
Well, I know.
And so
I know.
I was like, okay, cool.
You accidentally did like the OP bug with it.
I know, but that's, you know what? I'm too ethical that I couldn't. Yeah. I somewhere within me I knew that I was using an exploit. And I couldn't. So that's what it was. I got hotfixed and I was correct, basically. But yeah, no, there's that stuff. I think that like a lot of the dually cards are fun together. I think that the max stuff is really way more my jam though. I'm really liking the concept and like the play style of quests in general. I think that they're very fun and I like it a lot. It's Cement Smack is like probably my favorite, like slowly becoming more and more my favorite. I think the new quest stuff is really fun.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've heard very differing opinions on that. Just yesterday, I was talking to someone in a Twitch chat about how they feel like every expansion added to Mac makes him like less fun in their eyes, and how they're just slowly switching back to like Dooley and other characters.
Were they mostly playing 1 or 2 builds? Were they a Poppy Field only enjoyer, perhaps?
Well, I was a Poppy Field enjoyer, and I think the new expansion.
But you weren't a Poppy Field only enjoyer. You have a broader spectrum than that.
Yes.
I don't know. For a while, I don't know how true that was. I'd get like five Poppy 10 wins a day from
Yeah.
Well, either way you've taken to liking the quest, so therefore
I do like
the quest. Malleable.
Is the thing is someone could not like the direction of a character just because they really like one specific part of a base kit, and then you don't really realize how much like just adding 10 new cards and then 20 new cards dilutes that pool and makes you less likely to do that one exact thing you like. And it's like maybe you didn't actually like the general like playstyle of the character. You just liked that one archetype. Like if you liked, if you liked Dino Dooley in the base kit and then the bugs were added, you'd be like, you know what? My game where I only play Dino Dooley just got a little bit less consistent. I don't like it as much anymore. And then this new patch came out and you're like, awooga, you know, like it's different. No, Dooley's great now. Like, so I think that can definitely paint the picture a lot. But I liked Mac from Go as I liked his whole general loop. The only time I didn't really like Mac was the version of Peace Rot where you got the extra chunks. It was just too tedious, and it was too obviously the right thing to do, but also not fun. It was a lot.
You know what? You were correct, actually. As you mentioned that, I recalled some further information back from that conversation. It's somewhere deep within my hazy, fever delirious memories of the last 2 days, but they mentioned specifically that the reason they've been liking Mac less and less is because they feel like with every added expansion, he moves further from caring much about potions as a concept.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is true and fair.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, that is true. I do think that he needs to get some potions sometime. Like, because it was already a relatively shaky archetype, even in his base kit. It was shaky to get the pieces to make a board that was good with it. Like, it was there.
I mean, especially
but it was satchel, basically.
Yeah. It feels a bit especially weird with how many of his character skills are specifically related to potions.
Yeah, no, it definitely feels like in his next expansion, he should at least get a couple. But I will say, this was deleted out of my mind because of all the new stuff. Like the vial launcher change, that thing is good now. Like
very true.
That they did retroactively like upgrade some of the potion kit from the base kit, and I'll say that the vial launcher is actually kind of fun. I like it.
And I also do think the devs deserve massive props for, in what I now assume to be a new staple, the fact that they keep adding relevant cards to characters' base sets when we have a new season. I don't think it gets enough attention how big of a deal that is for the people who don't necessarily pay gems to unlock expansions on day one. You do still have meaningful new things to work with, and it also does mean that, obviously, we talked at length about this in a previous episode. I'm not going to go into it again. You can say what you want about custom scope as a design, but in terms of revitalizing single weapon Vanessa, it certainly did that. And I think a lot of the complaints are more about, I don't know that we wanted that, but if we revitalize Potion Mac, they've shown that there's a precedent, there's a room for that, even in a non-potion related expansion season. Or maybe just like next season when Mac doesn't even get any cards. You slide it in there.
Devs, if you're listening, just slide one new potion into Mac's base kit. When the next season hits, slide one new potion into Mac's base kit.
So I mean, they do listen to you, so like it'll.
That's
true. They don't listen to us. They listen to you. I did a test. I said put a silver knee brace on Borior. And they didn't do
it. I have directly talked to them, so like maybe that. I mean, I'll put in just everyone collectively tell me what you want right now, and I'll type out a big
silver knee brace on Borior to reward the tempo gamers.
We did also very much have Sixten on mic utter the words, man, I wish Dooley becomes stronger, and it would be so cool if they gave him like a T-Rex or something, and thus the
that is exactly true.
Yeah, he did say that.
Well, I almost thought it was a hint that they did listen to the podcast, because then you were the one who got to reveal you got to reveal the T-Rex.
Yeah, okay, fair. Look, they listen to you, Sixten, they only listen to. All right.
That was a joke because I've famously always been a dinosaur hater. But I guess I got more than I bargained for. So
No,
fair
no,
enough.
no,
I will
you
be more
gotta-
careful in the future.
I mean, Reddit said they didn't like it when the artist gave them the same enchant. Like they got with the
Yeah,
monkey's
exactly.
paw.
No, it's the monkey's. What is it called? The paw.
Yeah, the monkey's
right? Like
paw.
the-
Yeah.
Monkey's paw.
Speaking
Yeah,
of, actually,
it's-
I would love to just quick side note pick your brains. Do we like or dislike the enchantment change? What have been your
I
feelings
hate
on
it. It is. I already
Sixten
dislike that option.
Hates it, yeah. We'll go through the rounds and then we can. do,
Yeah,
like, a
I-
quick
Are we
talk about
talk? We're
it.
talking the current one where you get to the choice.
Two
You get to
options,
offer
but
two
they're
fixed
fixed, yeah.
enchants.
What do you think, Retro?
Honest, I don't shoot me, Reddit. I liked one fixed and one random. I liked it. I thought it was
Me
good.
too.
Because I remember a time where it was really easy to force specific enchants on stuff, and I
Mhm.
remember it led to some pretty volatile like end games, and it's just like, did you hit the one specific enchant or not? Like there was a meta that was really defined by it. I can't
For me,
remember.
the problem was always getting offered the same, like getting the enchant you intentionally opted out of from the random option.
Yeah.
Like that was
I think
always
that's-
the issue.
yeah.
I personally loved the idea between you have this door that you
Yeah.
know what is behind, but then you have this other door that can be anything. You know, I love
Yeah.
that kind of decision making. Whereas the current version for me, it removes skill. I feel like the skill expression is lower, and even more now. It's even more polarizing now in that, for example, if you're playing Railgun, which I'm gonna talk about in a minute or two, like Obsidian Enchant is just so much better than getting
Well,
a few of the others.
so
in my
I
opinion,
do
so it's-
actually think that because of that reason, I'm gonna be the contrarian here and say that I do like the change, because the thing that it, for me, the most represents is that I always felt a little bit like the artist was really skewed in terms of, if you have an enchant, that means like, if I hit this, I just win. A lot of the time I felt like I found myself in positions where just taking the roll would be, even though the odds were worse, the upside compared to the downside, the risk versus reward, was so skewed in terms of, if I miss, I can probably find some other way to work around it, even if it'll be a bit harder. But if I hit, it's just a free guaranteed 10 win. That made me just go for that a lot of the time. And
yeah, but that was a decision you made. Like there is no decision anymore.
Right,
Like,
no, but
there is
no,
I mean, I
I
think the
don't-
decision
decision-making.
now comes from okay, now it's like the decision comes from having a bag that allows you to hedge the enchants. So
and
I
also,
think
I think
you
there
can
was a
plan way better.
really cool moment that I saw, which I want to bring up as a counterpoint to this, where I was watching Trinet stream, and he was playing Railgun, and he had both Railgun and Atomic Clock, and he got one of the worst damage enchants. I don't remember which one it was. I think it was Poison, and he got Slow as an enchant. And he sat down and he had a very meaningful think about, do I want to go for a subpar offensive enchant, or, even though this is a build that typically, archetypically, benefits a lot from an offensive enchant, do I go for the utility enchant and completely change the dynamic of this railgun board? He ended up going with the slow on the atomic clock, and the very
That's a good
final
enchant.
matchup was a day 14 or day 15 like Exodia freeze mac board, where, between the fact that he had invested so heavily on this atomic clock to get instant cooldown increase and slows, this unenchanted, unskill modified, just regular ass diamond railgun with a crit core managed to kill them before they even got a single item activation off. And I'd never seen railgun played like that, and I don't think I would have seen railgun played like that if the choice was just, well, I can roll for Obsidian, so that's probably the right pick.
Yeah, I mean,
in fairness,
I
if
like
I
the
was in the
two fixed as
position-
well. I like them
Yeah,
both.
I
both
think
options.
it is fine. Just
don't give me 3.
I enjoy when there
Yeah.
are different ways. Like I enjoy when there is a bit of gambling in this game, like not like a risk calculation. So that I don't know. It feels so samey now. Like you have 2 options, and then like for example that heavy enchant. That is a great enchant. Like heavy and turbo on a clock is just amazing. So for me that
It's
would have,
very good.
even in the old system, if the fixed option was heavy, I would have just left it on the clock probably in that scenario as well. So like I agree that there is still good stuff here, but I do miss the dilemma. Like I loved the way you had to like kind of gauge if the average expected outcome of the random one is stronger on average than the fixed one. Like that was a fun mind game for me,
I just
which I feel like is
personally,
gone now.
I don't mind those dynamics being in the game. Let me be totally clear. I think, in a way, like every shop is that type of dynamic, right? A lot of the time we're offered a node that provides guaranteed value, or a shop where we have to think about the odds of it actually paying off. For me, it was just the fact that I personally just did not find it enjoyable, especially after the exp changes, when the level 10 enchant is maybe the single biggest power spike you're allowed in an average run at any point. Having that then be tied to an element that I didn't have that much control over, it kind of frustrated me. So the fact that it's
Yeah, I
that
agree.
specific decision that we removed RNG from is the main reason why I kind of
My least favorite version was when the brief window where we only had one option and it was the random. That was my least favorite.
Oh,
that was
yeah,
like that was
not a fan of that.
I deleted that from my brain. It just hit me that was
Yeah,
something that they
I
did for a
didn't
couple of days.
remember either
That was my
until
least
you
favorite.
said that. That was,
They walked that back so fast, and
Yeah,
thank
yeah.
God. That was not good.
But
I think when I was
I think
thinking,
overall it's
Mhm.
go on. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, I also didn't really like. For a while, we had 3 fixed options.
Yes.
Right?
That's what I was saying. Is I think that's
That
what I
was
was remembering. I was like,
too
we went back to 2 fixed options, but then I was like, oh no, we had 3. So like honestly, two's now that I think about it, 2 is probably right and where it should be.
Feels like way
3
more
was
of a
really
sweet spot.
forcible.
Yeah.
I think it's ultimately fine. I just don't know. I miss the when you had both a fix and a random, it added this tension that I miss. Like even if there were frustrating outcomes in certain builds, I just missed the again the way you had to weigh the options. I feel like it was another dimension of whereas currently you just have to manually go through all your items and kind of decide, okay, which enchant is the strongest here. Like I don't know, but anyway,
Yeah, but what
I'm fine with the
items you
current one.
have? Yeah, like what item? Okay, so it's like yes, that's true. If you like, land on planet Earth and I'm getting my enchant. But if you play the run with the idea in mind that you're going to be offered, probably you're going to be offered either one like 10x relative scaling enchant, either offensive or defensive. It's very possible to, in many games, have builds that are, or have an item in your bag that is there to receive a specific enchant or a specific type of enchant because it has like a scaling number. Like if you have a item with a scaling burn number, then that's a very attractive receiver of obsidian,
Sure, but I think that
like
was
heal or
we did that in the
shield.
last
We can let Walter
system as well.
finish talking.
Yeah.
Like so I think that it's like it rewards planning in a way. It's like you don't have to. Yes, obsidian is often like a super high roll enchant that radically changes the power of your build. But at the same time, like there's a lot of skill expression in I'm planning to be offered one of these options, and I have like a good answer of where to put at least most of the enchants I'm going to be offered. And that way, like you're hedging against the possibilities. Like, oh man, maybe like crit really sucks for your build no matter what you do. Okay, well, I just got to make sure that the other enchant I get that isn't crit has an attractive target. And that's something you actually can play for. It usually involves having one item that's like in the example Metal provided, where you have one item that's an attractive receiver of status effect enchants, and then one item that's an attractive receiver of damage or defensive enchants. Sometimes you have like three, like one that's status effects, one that's offensive, like a 10x, and then one that's like a defensive, like 10x. And in that way, you can kind of plan for or set yourself up for a good outcome on the enchant. So I do think it is skill testing. It's not skill testing in the moment. You have to evaluate the odds. That part is, yeah, absolutely, that skill test was removed, but it's been replaced by a different one, or not totally replaced. It's been somewhat replaced by a different one.
That's a good point. I didn't consider the fact, like, in the old system we couldn't guarantee that the other enchant would be different, right? So like both could be crit. That's a good point.
I also think for me, the biggest dynamic this introduces is it's kind of like spinning further on exactly what Walter was mentioning with hedging, where I mentioned how obviously in this scenario where we had heavy and then we had poison, and you're still playing railgun, you put heavy on the atomic clock. That's one thing. But a lot of the time, I felt like the random enchant, if you had two builds you were going for, and you got one enchant that's really good for the kind of second build that you were hedging, but it's not very optimal for the primary build that you are currently fielding. You were heavily incentivized to just roll on the build you have and eat shit if you miss. Whereas I do think it's a very interesting dynamic if you're offered a okay enchantment for your current build or a great enchantment for a build that you could potentially pivot into, because now that you know those are the only two options you're getting, it creates a much more valid reason to want to say, okay, no, actually, if I know for sure I cannot possibly get obsidian on this railgun, or I can't possibly get obsidian on this keg, or what have you, maybe you do go, you know what, I'm actually gonna take this other enchant and try to pivot into this build that I think I could really make work with the enchantment I was offered. So I like that.
I agree that is, it's a moment in the game where you're offered like a fork in the road, and that's really, that is a skill testing moment. When you set yourself up to like, oh, I've been stacking this huge coin cure in my bag, like, does that connect on my enchantment? Okay, it does. I go down that road. If it doesn't, I go down the other road. But the whole point is that you only get the option if you've been stacking the coin cure the whole run. So it's like the build up, and then you get the payoff when you find the perfect enchantment for that build that you've been setting up, like obsidian cold room, like whatever it is that like your build wants. You can set yourself up, and I really like that. I think it's a better way. Like, it's not that I hate random stuff, it's that artists
It's still
is
random.
like, yeah, it's still,
You only get two.
it's still random, right? But it's like it feels like the kind of random that I can influence, and that I
like
prefer
how
to artists.
It's output randomness,
Yeah, the guaranteed upgrades at 13 and 16 also felt like they having just a little bit of predictability in this otherwise highly chaotic game is kind of nice, because it gives
Absolutely.
you an anchor point for plans you're making towards the future. I do like
I really agree with
that
that.
aspect of it. I think we'll cut this section a little bit short and just briefly mention what we've been playing, and then move on to the topic of the week, because I feel like any further discussion on what we've been playing will naturally move into this, and this will make perfect sense in just a few minutes. But I've primarily been playing Dooley. I've been playing a mix of like the railgun stuff and the hydraulic press stuff, and a lot of dinos. In love with the dinos. They're cute, they're fun, they bring me joy. Sixten?
Yeah, I've actually been playing I've tried a lot of dually things, and I ultimately found myself now playing Railgun and Dinos. the other, I think those two are a clear step above the rest. And then you have the press as a, well, the problem with the press is that you cannot put it on the board in the early game unless you have specific other pieces. So that is like a valid late game or mid game build. Whereas I feel like Railgun and Dinos, just as soon as you get the relevant large item, you can just put it on the board and already perform. So for me, those are like the two most consistent dually builds. But then I've tried Companion Core, I've tried Kinetic Cannon, I even tried to force proboscis with, I got the train skill that they buffed.
Yes, I want to try
with
that.
Plasma Grenade, and it was like super cool, but I never got, I felt like I went to every boss that could have a proboscis, but I got this Stinger instead and stuff like that. So I'm still trying to make proboscis dually happen, but alas, not yet.
I think the dream is real now, finally.
Oh yeah, it's very real. But that covers my stuff.
I'm just going to mention briefly too, this is kind of without context, but it was something I hadn't realized myself. This hydraulic press kind of board that to remember how to spell words again. I'm just putting it on the screen. The hydraulic press board that we're referring to, kind of specifically, is the most common way to play this item, and it was a mind opener for me when I was told this. Is that obviously it's similar to Vat of Acid, it's similar to Beast of Burden. We'll talk about it more in the next segment, but just as a practical, if you're looking at this and you're going, what the hell are they talking about? That item has a 20-second cooldown, how are you putting it on your board? Since it gets the tags of things that you feed it, the general idea of a quote-unquote hydraulic press board is that you play a press that you've fed a core, and you have a remote control with a battery to have the battery activate the remote control to use the press to kill people very early on. And because that's your entire kind of pivotal portion of your board, those are the only mandatory items, it means that one, it's very easy to hedge. I play battery currently on all of my dually boards basically, so that's a freebie. And then you just need the remote, which is only one more small item. But it also means that it's one of the most tech-heavy boards possible in the entire game, since the remaining 5 slots can kind of be whatever you need them to be. You can make it give you shield by playing Tanky Anki. You can give it double multicast by playing a saddle. You can try to tech against freeze by including Dually Scarf. There's just a lot of things you can do with the press. So when we talk about playing hydraulic press, it refers to specifically with something like remote control to just make it very fast as the like generic use case scenario.
I'm also going to add, if you don't find remote control, there are 2 other ways to do it. A red button is probably the most common, which reduces the cooldown by half, so it makes it a 10-second item effectively, or, well, it removes 10 seconds from the cooldown. But then the other thing I had one game is if you turn it into a friend and you get the skill intrusion countermeasures. Yeah, basically when you fall below half health, you use the hydraulic press because it's a friend. So of course it is risky, because if you face another one-shot build, of course you're in trouble. But in practice, that's also like a guaranteed way to make it go off. But yeah, I think it's very cool. But again, you need to find one of these ways to get the cooldown down to like 10 seconds for it to actually work. Anyway,
and ideally, so it just depends on which stage of the game you're in. You can definitely play something like just a high tier battery to speed it up if you're not that late. But if you're like super late and you really want to go before you get like kegged by Vanessa or something, it's probably going to involve batterying the thing that then activates the press and so on and so forth. But I think it's really cool. I'm just going to say, I, for the longest time, felt like it was a big shame that Dooley was missing something you could set up to pivot to in the late game that was still kind of playable in the mid game too. The way that Vanessa has Keg, I think, is the most analogous, because yeah, this one you want specific items, but Keg was kind of similar in looking for incendiary rounds or heated shells together with like anything that makes it do more damage. So yeah, I feel like they're pretty similar. The battery could also be likened to the holster. They fill kind of the same function. It's cool that this is something Dooley has now. And finally, Walter, briefly mention what have you been playing?
Mac.
Quite
And
brief.
that does bring us into what have we been, or the topic of the week, which is going to be focused on metascaling. And specifically, we did find it very interesting that both of these new expansions they've released, the dinos and the quests, they are all focused on metascaling. And I think it's especially clear that we've seen kind of what can happen a bit when you introduce uncapped metascaling similar to like Orange Julian, especially when that breaks the confines of Pygmalion, who's kind of almost fundamentally balanced around having a lot of innate restrictions to what he can and can't do in order to balance the fact that he has such unlimited access to uncapped metascaling. And when you put that on a character like Vanessa, who has access to all of these things that make items really, really quick or charge a lot, it goes completely out of control. But at the same time, one of the things that makes the Bazaar so unique is that we have days and the days have hours, and that's a whole axis that typically isn't present in other games within the same genre, be it card games or auto battlers. Usually you just have like a combat phase and a purchase phase, or just player turns. And I do think that metascaling is a very interesting way to leverage this unique axis. And I think we can see the intersection of these two desires. We want to have metascaling, but we want to be able to control it a bit in these latest two expansions. They hotfixed the dinosaurs to be able to only do it once per combat. And the quests are kind of inherently capped because, you complete the quest, and that is it. And I know that especially the two of us here who have been playing a ton of Mac with, I mean, you can probably guess, the quests, they'll have a lot to say about this. So I'm gonna leave the floor to I mean, we can start with Walter because you didn't really get to talk much about what you've been playing this week due to that being primarily quests.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
then
I mean, look,
Retro can spin
I
off
was
that.
keeping my powder dry until
Yeah,
now, but
yeah.
yeah, I got a little spiel. Okay, so I played Matt. I bought the expansion with gems the moment it came out, and I played Quest Mac since. Not forcing it 100% of the time, but playing it very heavily. Going income start, obviously. Um, so couple of takeaways. First, I really love the quest mechanic itself. It's extremely skill testing. And I'm going to share an anecdote. Yesterday, I was playing a run. Node 1, I bought Sands of Time, Blank Slate, Magic Carpet. It was middle. And Mortar and Pestle. Right? So I bought all four of those items on the first node. And I had the option between fighting Viper and fighting Kyver and Pyro. And I want to say that I spent a full 2 minutes on this decision. It was the first time I've ever tanked on the day one monster fight in the entire game. The relevant information is Stinger is a slow item, Langjan is a relic, Trained is really good with like a scaling carpet with Sands of Time, and Trained is really good. But at the same time, like, it's sacrilege to skip Viper on Mac, right? It has been for his entire existence. It was unbelievably good to get Viper as Mac if you could kill him, and I could obviously I had carpet. So it's like a mechanic that forces you to reevaluate the whole game starting from the like first monster decision on day one. Like that's amazing to me. Like there's so much more to consider when you have quest cards than previous, and especially when it comes to deciding the monster fights, because you need to farm inside the monster fights, but also you need to get your Temple Expedition ticket, and the fights that have Temple Expedition tickets are often not ones that are easy to farm on.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, sometimes they are. And then there's also the whole layer of the loot and the XP and all the other considerations that were already there. They're there for everybody, right? So you've added another layer of decision complexity and skill expression onto the part of the fight that like or the part of the fight, the part of the game that like a lot of players up until this point have not spent that much time focusing on, right? Like unless you were pig, like it was like a major VIP pass coin cure, uh, uh, crystal bonsai min maxer, like I was when I was playing pig. Like many players are not used to this kind of like, okay, I have a strong build, so the normal way you play when you have a strong build is like the monster fights, most of them are trivial, and you just click the one that has the loot you want. In this case, it used to be that had the most XP, but now it's the one that has the drops you want, usually if the XP is the same. So to like throw that up in the air and say, no, when you're playing the quest items, the rules are totally different. That's extremely exciting to me. Not only is that the PvE themselves is like it's its own puzzle. Like min-maxing the quests are its own puzzle, and if you're the kind of player who likes to min-max, and I am that kind of player, it's really exciting to me to have this playstyle where like I might have a shop where I go and I buy 2 random burn items in the morning just to put on my PvE fight board to farm quests, and then I'll have to sell them for space during the afternoon after my fight. And it's like I have to rebuy stuff. I'm thinking like, ooh man, do I want to go to like Eli here? Like she's got rainbow potion. And like the amount of stuff that there is to think about, the amount of considerations to have, like what is the, what's what percentage of JJ's items are regen items? Like the questions that you've never had to answer, like how many freeze items does Curio have? Like he has frozen bludgeon and whatever. Like there's a lot
he's
more.
got a surprising amount.
Yeah, and he has regen items too, like Gland.
Yeah.
Like so
slow items.
Yeah,
Good.
absolutely. Like Stinger is a slow item. Like so there's so much more to think about when you have these quests, and I find that really engaging and enjoyable.
Yeah.
And I feel like like to get the elephant in the room, they're extremely OP. Like the freeze items are OP
Currently,
in
yes.
their current state. Yeah, they're completely OP. So what I want to say is that the way the quests work, because it's like they're capped, but it's skill expressive to finish them more quickly, right? Because of that dynamic, they do reward skilled play. And if they were less OP, they would actually be way more skill testing. Because then those little advantages matter way more. If I wasn't permafreezing your whole board at 5 seconds into the fight on day 6 or whatever, then it would matter actually that I got the burn proc on my blank slate while a worse player didn't. Do you understand?
Yeah.
Like the differences would matter if like the final board wasn't so abusive. I think the big mistake they made like was just simply giving 5 freeze targets to blank slate at diamond, or 4 freeze targets to blank slate at diamond. That was like too stupid, and it, in the sense that like it overwhelmed all the anti-freeze mechanics in the game because of the way ICD works. That was like a big error. I think that the 1 second on Frost Totem was also totally unnecessary. I think outside of those two, if they could like walk back those two, and then I think it would almost be balanced by itself. Is
I'm
where
gonna
I'm at
chip
with it.
in with that. I especially do think it's worth pointing out that the limited nature of quests give us so many more balancing and tuning levers, because they can change what the card has at base. They can change all the usual stuff, like just the raw numbers, the rarity, but they can also change which reward gives what, at what stage is the item most potent,
Yeah, the speed
or
of the quest completion,
yeah,
everything. There's so
even
many
Yeah.
so many
what are
options.
the
Yeah.
actual criterias, which should mean that, yeah, they did a miss. I've seen the developer in charge of that particular balancing decision has also pointed out the biggest mistake was they shouldn't have pushed it on a Friday. It's unfortunate, shit happens.
It
They'll
happens.
probably
And there's also a
think twice
bug that's
before next
magnifying
time.
their power,
Yeah.
which is that blank slate costs only 2 gold.
Yeah.
And
That
so
is true.
that means that day one middle, you can, if you have day one node one middle and 20 gold, you can go and buy 5 items from middle after re-rolling them, as long as one of them is a blank slate. And
Mhm.
But
and like that
yeah,
is
and
kind of crazy.
all that stuff aside, it's felt very noteworthy that there have been some times in the past where, yeah, the devs eventually managed it, but I've looked at some items in some spots where some things were problematic. Like, I mean, just look at something like Crow's Nest. If you want to balance that item, if you think that's too strong or too weak, pretty much the only things you can do is like change the rarity or rework the item, right?
Yeah.
I think a good thing with that, you can look no further than to how much trouble they've had figuring out how to change Shipwreck and Robotics Factory. Like,
Yep.
having an effect that is give everything one multicast is like, well, how do we nerf that? How do
Right.
you how does that get nerfed?
There's nothing
It
to
literally
increment, yeah.
it has one thing it does, and one is the lowest number. How do we help?
And so I feel like oftentimes we talk about new cards restricting design space, but I do think this is a pretty cool example of sometimes the opposite can happen, and we add new mechanics that open up new avenues of like good design and good balance. And
Yes.
what I would especially love to see is maybe all the characters get some amount of items that have quests on them, but you
I've thought
make
about that
them
too.
like distinctly different types of quests. Like maybe Vanessa, could care about defeating specific types of monsters, or obviously these are not very like thought out opinions, but
Yeah,
like
like defeating the pirate monsters, like
yeah,
the servants of
Yeah.
the tyrant or of the tyrant king or whatever, like some
right.
kind of
Or how
Yeah.
something like
like
that.
the Fixer Upper is basically a quest item already.
A lot of
right?
pig things are basically quest
Yeah.
items. Like a
And
lot of them would actually like mechanically be less frustrating to use if they were converted into a quest item.
obviously for like
sure.
if they want to add a dinosaur quest item, it would make a lot of sense to have like something happen after you destroy a certain number of items. You could have like
Yeah.
an egg that slowly hatches
It's
as you accomplish things be a quest item. Like it's a very
it's
broad
massive
design
design
space.
space.
Yeah.
Yeah. But like I was the moment I played my first round as Mac with the new items, I was like, this is something that I do hope doesn't remain a part of only Mac's identity. But I think that a way they could do it that's kind of interesting is Mac could be the only one that has cards that care about completing other like quests on other
Yeah,
cards and stuff like that.
totally.
Like
And
Mac has
especially
the new ruins that has
yeah,
that, where it's
yeah.
like it cares
And
about the quests being completed on other cards.
one of his items like speeds up a quest item or something.
Yeah,
right?
so I think that could remain a Mac thing, like it being referenced on other cards, quests and stuff like that. But I think like I don't think that they're going to limit themselves in terms of like because it's just like it's such a broad interface that lets you
Yeah.
design so many
And
different cards for so many different characters.
especially right, like having cards like excavation tools, if you get quests on other characters, means that they become a very interesting like off-color item, and they are tools as well, so they're coded for a lot of stuff like
Yeah,
the
Doc's tool
jungle
or
ruins for
dualies.
Dually,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
yeah, Doc's tool, that kind of
Mm-hmm.
stuff. Um, a massive fan of like just imagining all the future possibilities that
Yeah,
that this could bring.
it's maybe bold to say, but yeah, it might be my favorite mechanic they've ever added since beta is quest, just because of the potential is so high.
I mean, I'll pretty easily agree, and I did also want to iterate on or emphasize a specific point. If all of the things that Walter talked about when describing quests sound intimidating, you don't necessarily need to feel that way, because kind of the beauty of them, right, is that they reward small edges, but at the same time, it's not like it's absolute or rocket science. Even the best player won't be
Mhm.
able to easily, like, mathematically calculate the best decision in most cases, unless you want to do
Yeah.
what Goosefather did and spend like 5 hours in a run. You can do that. Very few players are gonna. So at the end
I
of the
backseated
day,
him for almost all of it.
yeah, at the end of the day, it still comes down to intuition. And the things that Walter
Yeah.
described are the things that, whether or not you're consciously aware of you doing it, that's what you do when you pick a shop, when you pick a PvE encounter. What they're really doing is both emphasizing that core part of the Bazaar that is always there, has always been there, will always be there, but more importantly, they're emphasizing it in a way that makes it more engaging and more interesting. Because instead of having to think about these decisions in a completely abstract, complicated vacuum, you have a number put to your goal. You can know that if I want to complete this quest, I'm looking for relics and I'm looking for freeze items, or I'm trying to poison, or
Yeah.
whatever it is you're trying to do. So it's the best of both worlds, where it adds some clarity to the choices you might want to be pursuing for a less experienced player, but it also adds skill expression in terms of knowing exactly how to min-max and squeeze every bit of advantage out of being able to complete the quests as fast as possible for a more experienced player, without landing in the pitfall of, because these advantages can be so incremental, if it's something that you're allowed to do indefinitely, it can lead to a experienced or an inexperienced player eventually having just like a completely insurmountable difference in the position that they find themselves in. So it solves a lot of problems in a really cool way.
Yeah. I fully agree.
And it's like, if you
No,
enjoy the min-maxing
go ahead.
process, the total percentage advantage you're gaining by doing it is not that high. Like, the
Mm.
difference
No.
between me min-maxing the quests and someone who's like playing it in a more like loose way, and just kind of doing like, oh, okay, I need some burn, I'll put a burn item in here, and not really thinking about like how long am I gonna take before I accidentally kill the monster and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Um, is that like they maybe complete that quest like one day later, and the total impact on their run in terms of like win percentage is quite minor. It's more that like I just enjoy the puzzle of it, and like because it's like optimal play, it's like you can always be like looking to refine yourself towards that. It's like a goal, and it's something to work towards the goal in the middle of the part of the game, which like for much of the game's history, all the monster fights are trivial, and I just
Mhm.
click the one with the most XP. And this is so much
Yeah.
more engaging than that.
I mean, it's the same
Yeah.
reason, right, why we were such a big fan of the monster exp change, because it achieves a very similar result.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, on the note of the min-maxing the fights, I just a brief aside is how I find it very fun, specifically the puzzle of min-maxing, like you said, burn on blank slate is the most fun one, because
Yep.
I find myself going into combat and instead of making the best possible board, you basically have to flip it backwards and be like, how do I make the worst possible burn board?
Yep.
And
the most low number burn items.
What is it? How do I have the most ineffective burn board I possibly can that still technically burns a lot? And I find that to be a weirdly fun puzzle to do.
Yeah,
where it's just like, okay, I have the leftmost buff on my burn. Okay, that's got to go on my ruby. Like I gotta.
Or trying to flip the X2 multicast burn card on silver rank is also extremely hard.
Yes, it's really hard. Yeah, so you're putting your huge burn buffs on ruby and like your terrible burn buffs on like your fast stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's just it's a funny way to actually be rewarded for being good is knowing what the worst way to do the fight is.
Oh,
and
yeah,
it's kind of fun.
It's a game knowledge question, right? And
exactly.
like if knowing what the enemy fights do, like intimately, like okay, this guy's gonna have like 80 regen at the end of the fight, like, and how much HP they have, and like, okay, how long can I last in the sandstorm? Like all of this stuff. Like in my run that I posted earlier, I was farming on the Corsair fight, and it's like I was confident. I was confident because I knew I had the regen relic that like I'm just not gonna lose. Do you know what I mean? Like I know the math and like I'm confident in my math. Pro
tip. Oh no, you go ahead. Sorry, you finish.
Yeah. I'm just saying that like that seems regen is insane again in PvE, and like if you are confident in your math and in your game intuition, like there's a lot of cool and fun stuff to do with the quest. So that's it. That's my spiel.
My pro tip for quest max stackers: one of the best fights in the entire like mid game, Blood Reef Raider is amazing. Crow's Nest Revolver, Invuln Potion.
Yeah.
He sits there and he does nothing to you, but also heals himself. But he's never a threat. It's Blood Reef Raider is a great click.
My other tip is that like a flip to regen relic, like Solo's Lich, basically.
That too. I've also never clicked Kyver Commander more because he's a free fight that has an expedition ticket that you can farm on. He's like, so I've never clicked him more. It's interesting when things change the game and you go to fights that you don't click.
It's
normally.
throwing the decision priorities.
So
out,
I was going to ask
whack.
on the topic of Quest Mac, how often do you actually utilize the relics from the expedition? Are there any of those relics that are like
yes,
really
some
good
of them
for
are
the
busted?
Yeah.
A couple are
not
busted,
just the enchants. The Blaze Howl Warden is extremely good.
Yes, I find on Duel,
and the poison version of that too.
Yeah.
On Duel, I just grab the Obsidian or the Fire Enchant and call it a day because it's so hard to make the others work on Duel, at least with the current Duel items.
Dino, I've seen multiple people using the neither player can freeze with Nitrogen Hammer to absolutely terrify.
Oh yeah, that's good. Yeah, okay, that one. But you don't always see that
Frost
one.
is good. The large one that enchants an item, and whenever you use an anyone they use an enchanted item chart. That one's good in lots of boards.
I've actually used,
but with Mac you can use pretty much any of them.
I've used the one that Obsidian enchants random items on your board.
That one's good too.
Because a lot of the time you can like play dino boards where you have few enough things and enough other items that are already enchanted that you can kind of determine where the obsidian is going to go and always get it, at least one of the two obsidians on something good. So I do think there is some interesting stuff you can do with that.
Yeah, no, Mac can use pretty much all of them. Dooley can use a couple for sure. But I also will say there's a few things that are relics that you wouldn't think are relics, and you can. I think that I saw a pig who had a fiery Atlatl, which is a relic, and he had that with a Blaze Howl Warden, which is like your burn relics gain burn.
Oh, now that's sick.
And it's like, really that was sick. That was every 1 second he procced it, and then it was so good. So like there are things out there
they've
that
been
people
like
probably haven't thought of.
sneaking the relics in there for a while. Where like I've read a lot of patch
Yes.
notes where I go like, why is that a relic now? Why do we care about that?
Yeah,
And
there's a
then-
few that don't make sense.
No,
but
no,
most of
more
them do.
like
Unduly.
I didn't know why they were making them relics because it seems so
Oh,
irrelevant.
yes.
But it's like
Yeah,
they
yeah,
very
yeah.
cleverly spread it out over an extended period of time so that when the expansion dropped, most of those things had been like forgotten from our recent memory. So it's like a really, really, I think, genuinely clever and cute way of obfuscating information from the players without any form of active deception. They didn't not tell us that these things are relics, and they didn't hide the fact that they are relics now, but they drip
Yeah.
fed us the information before we knew what it would mean, in a way that both meant that someone really savvy might have predicted it happening, but it also means that for people who didn't pay that close attention, we now get this really, honestly, I think, cool moment of, wait, shit, yeah, Adlal is a relic, of course it is. It's a ancient weapon themed to fit within this jungle expansion. Why didn't I think of that? So
Yeah, that's when I
kudos.
really wanna
Yeah.
use that.
I love when it feels kind of like there's some degree of trust and harmony between the developer and the user of a product, in this case the game, the Bazaar, where it's like, obviously developers want players to have a certain experience, but you can be very much more or less forceful in how you go about making them have that experience. Like,
Mhm.
if you want people to play new things and you suddenly give them like 10 new cards, they're likely to play with the 10 new cards. That's very natural. But if you wanted them to, like, play only Railgun and you made it deal like 1,000 damage, that's a very forceful way of being like,
Yeah.
haha, you must play Railgun. So it's always so fun to me where, like, I have no doubt that this has been going on for such a time that it's hard to imagine that it was completely unintentional that it looks that way. So you gotta imagine that that's how they set it up to now let us have this really cool experience of kind of, regardless of which character you're playing or which expansions you have or don't have, this element of the whatever they call the expansion, the Jungle Ruins, is somewhat universal to playing the Bazaar right now, which I think that's cool.
Yeah.
I did also want to mention just briefly on the topic of the min-max stuff we were talking about for quests earlier. I think there are two things that are cool. One, the fact that monster fights have long since been like part of the learning curve of the Bazaar, but now we have kind of progression in tiers, where the first thing a player needs to learn is, what can I actually beat? And sometimes you go to a new character and you have to relearn that, and sometimes the monsters change and you have to relearn that. But like level 1 is, what can I beat? And then level 2 is like internalizing which more niche items do I care about on which builds, and to kind of know that without needing to constantly spend a bunch of time looking it up, which is also cool. But now we have like a third layer of, if you already know all of this, you can take it one step further if you want to, and you've opted into playing these types of quest items, where you can also try to min-max utilizing all of that knowledge that you've already naturally accrued through playing the game. And I think that's one of the coolest ways of doing skill expression, where it's not like, oh, why didn't you know that tiny furry monster could give you the XP you needed to hit level 3 on day 2?
Yeah.
Skill gap, I guess. You should have just known. But instead, this is something that you genuinely into it from playing the game, no matter what your actual skill level is. Sure, there's differences in degree, but anyone will get some kind of idea of how far can I or can't I push PvE encounters, and especially now that with the 2 free exp that we get at the start of the game, I find that occasionally losing PvE encounters have almost become like the most forgiving it's ever been, which is cool too.
Yeah, with the exception of if you lose on like day 2, then it's really bad.
Yeah,
But
if you lose on day 2, very fine.
Yes.
Don't do that.
but later in the game, they're
Yeah.
they're a bit more forgiving to lose.
Which, to be fair, like losing on day 2 was always really bad.
Yeah, that was
It was always
that was
bad. You just
never
couldn't. You
good.
just didn't notice.
So yeah, in a way, it's I think
it's
maybe the most
it's more
forgiving.
obvious now.
Yeah, and the final thing of note is that I do think the problem with Ledger. We've discussed this many times. Is it called Ledger? Is it called Deed now? I can never
It's
remember.
called
It's
Ledger.
currently
Every
Ledger.
time, every time.
Yeah, Ledger. Yeah, no, I
Just
cannot.
delete it
I
so we don't
cannot
have to.
remember.
Just who
Yeah,
cares?
the problem with Ledger was that it kind of forced you to opt into this min-maxing situation, which I didn't find like that frustrating in a vacuum. If I have to Ledger min-max 1 time, I can live with that. If I have to do it 2 times, I can live with that. If I'm like playing a bad blocker board and I just want to get my things up to 10, I can live with that. It's when I have to sit and do that for an hour. That's when I'm like, oh, I don't really want to do that. If I
Yeah.
have to buy individual gumballs like 2 times every like 3 separate runs or whatever, no sweat off my back. I'll press some individual gumballs on every character
Yeah.
occasionally. The problem was that when you couldn't press buy 5 gumballs, that was the gumball experience every time. And when you had EU server lag,
Yeah.
I was fucking pressing gumball machine meant fucking a minute of my life is just gone into the abyss. It was a bad time.
Yeah.
And that's the difference between quests, is that they innately prevent that situation from even being able to occur, because there's a hard cap on the degree to which you might need to min-max. So, you know.
Yeah, they get completed. They end. So
Yeah.
then you stop farming and you stop having to do the thing. Like the game changes after you finish the quest, and it's good that it changes because now I can go do something else and focus on another part of my run. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's something to do, and then that thing ends. Whereas like Ledger, just you keep having to do it for the whole game basically, or you did when it was super OP.
And I think
And-
like having those things that you only need to do some of the time in some of the runs can be all the difference between making it a chore or a genuinely fun and engaging minigame.
Yeah, just tempo. If you're listening, convert Ledger. Well, first of all, give it a third name. Second of all, convert it to a quest item. When you sell blank items, it unlocks the effect of just like every hour the things on the side get 1 value or whatever. Like it's something of that. Like, obviously, the numbers tweak around and that stuff, but like
make it like
that would make that item so much more fun to
gives
use.
you like trader type effect when you complete it.
Yeah, like just make it make that a quest item. The quests I think are the way to solve those awkward play patterns and make them like, because that's the thing is like you want the value usually on 2 specific things or like on one specific thing and then something to sell. It's just like, but having to go up and check like, oh wait, was I at 8? Was I at nobody has, even the most min-maxers probably would like it if that was just converted into a quest that then did that passively after you put in the min-max work.
I don't even think min-maxers like doing tedious stuff. It's just that
I don't think so either. Some people do. The most pig mains of pig mains have told me they enjoy it, but most people don't.
Yeah, I think min-maxers like doing the min-max stuff, whether it's tedious or not, and that's my motivation, right? So
it's
I think
too, So I think there's a way to have that head scratch, like brain itch min-max without having it be tedious, and I think Yeah.
Also,
just
please
make
give
some
us
of
a
those
quest
pig items
core.
quests.
The last time
I would love a
Retromation was on the
quest
podcast, we requested a
Oh.
core that changes
Yes.
depending on what you go for.
Yeah.
So like a core that has
Mm.
mutually
Talked about it.
exclusive. It's like if you either or, so it's either like for example, buy 10 poison items, it becomes a toxic core, or you buy 10 dinosaurs, 10 dragons, it becomes but like a core that is like a blank slate, and then it just transforms into something crazy. That would be so cool. I think.
It is a good thing to mention too, as you said, like the idea of you can also make quests where outcomes are mutually exclusive, and
Yeah, I mean, they already have the
cool.
Soul
Because
Stone
there's the
card
one
already.
on the Soul Stone. So
yeah, it
good.
already has that where it's like
Oh
you
right,
have
is
to
that the
choose
like
between.
small one?
Yes, it's the small 4-second item, and you
It's
have to
the
choose
least
between
used one of the pack. but
poison
it's-
or
the
burn.
design is good.
Yeah.
The design is
Yeah,
good.
I think that's a great. You mentioned like levers to balance items, and I think having mutually exclusive rewards is a great way to do that. So like
it's
you cannot
so
double dip.
fun.
It's just
Yeah.
a nice way to kind of make items be multiple items. Like it's almost, in a way, it's like 5 items in one almost in practice. If you have that kind of mechanic, so I'm a big fan of that, for sure.
It's also interesting sometimes. Like I've had maybe it only has come up like once, but also like Soulstone is the only item that has it. Where I've been like, I don't want to pick up that item or purchase that item because that is going to progress this side of the quest.
Yeah.
But like, I would ideally like this to freeze.
I didn't even
and not
consider
slow.
that. Wait.
Yeah, I think that's the main reason why you might want actual like mutually exclusive quests, is because it can add some really interesting dynamics of having to be careful of. Imagine an item, right? Like Pygmalion quest item. One side says like deal this much damage, and one side says do this much healing.
I thought all Jabalians were pacifists, though.
Right? And maybe you really badly want to go for a late game heal build that kind of almost requires this particular like heal side of this quest item, but the early game board you found has you in like Lumbors and Jabalian Longbow. You have this really interesting like measure of like, do I give up on that line in order to
with the quest,
power up my current board, or do I give up on the tempo of my current board to make sure that I can get the future line that I want? So
yeah. And like that's a type of thing that even comes up already with the quest items, even with them being strong. Like every once in a while in my backpack, I'll have one too many quest items and you only have so much money. I'm like, I think I might have to give up on, the slow line, like, or something. And so I can, or whatever. But yeah, even with the Soul Stone, I just had an interesting situation where it's like I got a monster drop that would have pushed me over the line into unlocking the slow on it instead of the freeze. And I was like, I'm doing more of a freeze thing. And like, I feel like it's a unique question. It's I like when I get asked questions. What was that?
Okay.
You're a villain too?
I am a villain. I told you. I played all this stuff. Here's the thing. Yeah. I played a lot of the free stuff before it got buffed, and then so did I, yeah. And then I saw that it got buffed. I was like, "What?"
Yes, the feast begins. Like I know. I don't understand it. I didn't get one shot by 50 hydraulic presses on Wednesday just to not play Mac when it's OP. Like
it's true.
Okay, I see the future, guys.
Yeah.
I grabbed the new core that whatever the first item you buy or get in your stash, it turns into that tag. And then your first opponent is a pig with piggles, and it becomes a toy core, and your run is strict. That's gonna happen.
Toy core.
That's definitely gonna happen.
The only thing standing in your path is that currently you don't grab piggles. They need to make the piggles.
True.
They need to make it
exactly. They'll change it just to
they need to make it like insect bites and valley fever, where it pops up as a choice, but you can't leave. You have to press
the unskippable piggle.
You have to press the piggle.
And it takes up an hour as well.
Those piggles have ruined. I'm trying to remember what they've ruined. Is it when you like have Unduli items that give you stuff at the start of, or what is?
It's
there was a lot of Peace Rot Mac time. Piggles were griefing you a lot during when you're trying to do Peace Rot stuff because your backpack space.
If you level up,
it can grief schematics.
Yeah, if you level up on your PvP day.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I remember piglets being such a frustrating items on certain builds. But yeah, anyway.
It's funny, yeah. Yep. Anywho.
Good.
Okay.
Good things. Did we have anything else we particularly wanted to mention within
Well,
the top
you
20
mentioned
league?
before we started the pod a bit about dinosaurs as a form of meta scaling. I don't know
Right,
if we
yeah,
should.
I can say the
go into
main
that.
thing that I think is cool. We'll talk more about
No, we could actually
dinosaurs
go
and the
into the state of the
meta,
because they
but
are.
I think
Yeah.
the one thing worth mentioning about their meta scaling is that I think there's a real point to. So when it comes to uncapped, or well, rather like there's no technical like limit to how far you can keep scaling your dinos. You can just, if you had an infinite number of fights, you could do an infinite amount of scaling. And when it comes to this, where it's basically you want to do this every fight and you never stop doing it. I'm a big fan of this idea of making it less obnoxious and making it less volatile by just
Yeah.
saying, well, your items can only trigger this once per combat, and bam, you have a realistic limiter because there are only so many combats. But it also made it immediately so much like it's a cool choice the first time you have to decide how many dinos do I want to keep on my board to buff them versus how many do I want to take off to draw out the combat to let my Diana eat more times. But like you do it enough times, you just go like, I don't, I don't want this no more. Just let me just
Yeah, there's a point where you
play the
stop caring.
TV. Yeah, it's a point. There's a
There-
point where it gets tedious, and now that's completely gone.
There's also an interesting thing with the dinosaurs that I've definitely noticed where there's almost a soft ceiling, at which case like
Yeah, they kill too fast that you can't.
They kill
farm
too
them,
fast that
yeah.
you can't eat. So there actually is like a soft built-in cap that's but it is
But
like
that's why
the moment you don't need them to scale anymore, they stop
but
scaling.
that's why it felt so nice and intuitive, where it's just
Yeah.
like, especially if what I oftentimes play is one of Diana or Mama and then Trollosaur. And if that is what you're running,
Yeah.
as long as they don't die before your Chompy Dino chomps, then you always get at least 2 eats. So at
Yeah.
that
I mean,
stage of the game, it's fairly consistent and reliable to get.
Do you run into the
2
situation
hits.
where you have to like grief your own Sawyer cooldown so he doesn't kill before the chomp gets off? Because I would think that the main
Yeah, he's the guy that
limiter
definitely ruins it.
to your ability is like the Sawyer, right? Because he has such a short cooldown,
That
so he'll just
happened a
kill really
lot
fast.
before the change. It does not happen so much
Okay.
after, because as I mentioned, a lot
Yeah.
of the time I'm running like Crude Tools battery, and I'm not very concerned in my Sawyer like killing from full in like 2 hits for most
Gotcha,
Yeah.
Pvs.
It's one of those things where if that's your problem, you're not really having any problems.
Yeah,
Fair
and
enough. He was so ridiculous
Yes.
and
before.
especially
Yes.
like what ends up happening a lot of the time then is Diana and Moma have 9-second cooldowns, which means that with battery you usually expect them to activate at like 6 seconds ish, and Troll is at 7 and Saw is at 2.5. So you go Saw hit, Mama Troll, which means that the only thing you need is the first 2 Saw hits can't kill, or maybe like, because you have to have like a diamond Anki for him to go faster than that. I believe his 5 at diamond. Let me double check.
Sounds right.
Uncheck. Yeah, he's 5 at diamond. So assuming you have like a silver or gold Anki, which
Yeah,
is
I mean,
like
I still
the
have some
average
Sawyer
scenario.
PTSD. Like, I legit got crit for like 3,000. It was like a 3,000 damage addle.
Yeah,
on
and
a
you know
small
when
item,
you
like
get that's
Yeah.
as Retro saying. To be fair though, since they've both reduced the scaling and how frequent.
I know it's
you
not
can
like that
scale, yeah.
anymore. Yeah, I
But
understand.
that's when it was
It's
like
not
doubly
far from that right now, but it is not quite as yeah.
The main thing that was so frustrating about that loop was Sawyer was the one you wanted to get the damage, because the reason I've moved on to playing much more Troll is because, yeah, he's slower than Saw, but he basically has a built-in Fiery enchant on top of whichever other enchant you put on him. But in addition to that, he also gets an additional piece of scaling for every destroyed item. So now that you get less destroys, it's much easier comparatively to scale a troll to sufficiently high numbers. But before the hotfix, when you could just get Saw to like 1,000,000,000 damage, that meant that that was probably what you were trying to do, but then it's even more annoying trying to min-max if you need multiple eats, but Saw has to be on the board to get the buff. It's like, it was the worst. So,
Yeah.
glad that's gone. Now it's just fun, honestly.
It's nice when balance and quality of life meet in the same
Yeah.
like the same decision. It's so nice when that
For
can happen,
sure.
and I think that's what
I mean, it happened with the
Dinos.
Peace Rot nerf, right? Like,
Yeah,
same
that
thing.
too. Yes, exactly. It's nice
It's a
when
better
it's
better
nice
design
when the nerf.
and
Yeah,
and more
like because then
and
everyone's
more
kind of
fun to
happy,
use. Yeah.
kind of.
Okay. With all
as
that
much as they can
said,
be.
we'll move on to the state of the meta in one moment. I'm just gonna take a quick, like, 2-minute intermission. The recording will be paused, so it's just 2 minutes on our side, but we will be right back.
All right.
And we are back. It was a little bit longer for us than it was for you guys, but nonetheless, now we will move on to the state of the meta. And as we mentioned at the start of the episode, we know that the devs have stated that they want to push a hotfix ideally today, if not today, tomorrow at the latest, at the time of recording, which means that we're not going to be talking that much about Freeze Mac, especially because we know that that's one of the things that they have stated they are nerfing. So we already know it's going to be obsolete by the time we mention it. Instead, we want to talk more about how archetypically we do think these expansions have some effects on the meta that are likely to persist almost no matter how balance does or balance goes after the hotfix. And I think a great way to mention at the start is I've been speaking a lot to Goose about this current meta, and he mentioned how, yeah, Freeze Mac shutting the door on you feels pretty bad as a Pygmalion main. You don't have a lot of relevant counterplay, but that's almost not the biggest issue, because for all of last patch, especially the tail end of it, what led Pig to have such a rise in prominence was the fact that he had very strong late game options, but he also had a lot of passable just piles of items with text to play in the mid game. A lot of Lumbors, a lot of Showcase. That stuff got you very, very far. And this gave him a huge amount of equity within the game, because the more wins you go into the late game with, the less volatile it'll be, regardless of if you try to stick to that build or if you pivot out. Whereas if you're always on the knife's edge, it's going to be a lot harder to play. We've seen this dynamic play out, especially when Mac released and when Mac got his first expansion as well. They were both very heavily focused on early mid-game status effect, something that Pygmalion has historically not been very favored into. And right now, the current mid-game terror of the meta, I would say, is Dooley. And partially it's Dino Dooley with Tanky Yankee. It's very hard for fair boards to trade with this item. But even more so, it's the fact that we have Railgun at bronze. It's a reliable option Dooley can consistently find. And it kills you. It doesn't care if you're running shield, if you're running burn, if you're running poison, if you're running weapons. It doesn't care which character you're playing. It doesn't care which god you believe in. The railgun will kill you dead. And Pygmalion definitely suffers a lot from this fact. But I also think it does kind of shape the way we play the meta. I don't think that's inconsequential in terms of Walter alluded to it earlier, but he's been one of the longest standing, staunchest players of gold skill on Mac, and suddenly we're going income. And part of it is because income works really synergistically with the quest package, but there's also a degree of it being because if you can't reliably win even with a gold skill against a dually that picked income, if they just have a railgun, then you might as well go for the long haul, right? So,
Yeah, gold
um,
skill feels really dead, by the way.
mm,
It's just like, it's too hard to fill up six board spots.
Yeah, 2 more board slots is a big nerf to gold skill.
Yeah. So
I
your
feel
relative power is just so it's in the toilet compared to
yeah,
the
that's definitely really massively increased the stocks of income start too, right? Because
Yeah,
everyone
absolutely.
now,
You need to shop. You need to keep shop on day one a
yeah,
lot to buy
and
6 slots worth of items.
feels like we're a
huge,
few patches away from it being the only start. Like they just go back and be like, you know what?
yeah,
We're going back to the drawing board. It's everyone just starts income. Screw it. We're
I
done
mean,
trying to
I
balance
feel a
this
little
stuff.
bit
Honestly-
like, yeah.
Go on. So I think income, like the more I play the Bazaar, the more like income and gold is just more fun. Like it allows you to.
I agree.
It just gives you
Yeah.
more options. Like I don't know how to explain. Just it is.
Well,
just
People call me
feels
boring.
better.
I
I don't
think
know
it's
how-
more
I don't know how
fun.
to-
I think it's more fun. I don't know why.
Yeah, I don't know how to
just-
explain
Well,
it. Like
does.
I
I am
think
very pleased if that option is just the best one by far because that
Yeah,
way
no more
I
obsidian
have more
catfish.
fun. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Just less frustration, basically.
well, I think I can maybe kind of put words to why that is, and I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that we've now hit like a threshold of every character having at least 2 available expansions, which just inherently, unless all of those cards are unplayable, that's gonna boost your build diversity. And the thing that happened before a lot was like having the right skill or the right enchanted item could really open some doors, and having tempo could open doors. But now there are more items you want to buy, there are more upgrades that matter, and there are more paths that you can get into by having viable hedges. So I do think that has especially resulted in why in the past a lot of people saw income as kind of like, this is the thing you do if you're trying to force flagship Vanessa or whatever. But like now it's more
Yeah.
like it can enable all of the various builds.
Yeah. It could be that thing. I think it's just like the nature of how I play the Bazaar is strange. But, you know, it supports either forcing a specific thing or being incredibly flexible, which is like it's funny. It's one start that supports 2 completely divergent philosophies, which I think is also like a reason why it's a good start too. Like
Yeah, I mean,
design-wise.
one thing that I think was from the point of view of a player who really enjoyed gold skill in previous metas, and I kind of saw the writing on the wall with this patch, and I tried gold skill for like I played income first, and I tried gold skill for like 2 runs, and I was like, oh no, it's horrible compared to income on this patch. One thing I did find appealing about it in the past was that it did kind of point you in a direction and vary your run in that way. So I do think that like with income as a player, maybe I tend to fall into the trap of like doing the same thing every game because it's like easier to get. You have more looks at getting the items you like because you can re-roll way more shops in the early parts of the game. And so it can kind of make it so that your runs look more like one another if you don't like force yourself to diversify. And I'm like a player who has a hard time not doing what I think is the best thing.
Yeah.
And so I think in that way, I appreciated gold skill in that it forced you to go down less common lines when you rolled skills that were not your like preferential skills, right? So like you still had like, okay, I play half my games with like a weapon skill start and go weapons on Mac, but then it's like
Mhm.
I play another 30% of my games with a poison skill, and then I also might go weapons, but maybe it's a little different. And then like I play another like 15% of games with like a burn skill or like a regen skill, or like, and you kind of go down the list, but then like
Yeah.
the builds get more and more different as you start quote unquote low rolling the skills you don't want. They actually
Mhm.
force you to play different stuff, and they force you to adapt and learn different lines. Whereas like income, I feel like I could just get whatever line I thought was best in most games, more so than I
It's
could with skill.
it's weird because it's like you can look at the skill the same way in how I said you can look at income as either it's pro force or it's anti force. You could say the same thing about skill then, where it's like, okay, well, if I get this skill, I feel forced to use it. So it's like it determines it does. I felt whenever I take gold skill, I feel trapped into making good use of it, which because it's so strong and it's the only power you get, you don't get any extra money. Like you have, if you're not utilizing it well, you are in trouble. So it's like
Oh, for sure, absolutely.
it's
If you
it's
brick, you're
weird.
absolutely in trouble, and you can low roll in that way too.
Yeah, and
But
like
also, like
you
it
hit a
does
burn
force you to
in.
do something that maybe you otherwise wouldn't have been inclined
Yeah,
to do,
exactly. But that's
which is
the thing is where
interesting in
I'm
its
saying
own
is
right.
like
Yeah.
it's I think it's weird that both of those starts can be looked at through the lens of either encouraging or limiting creativity.
So I
I don't
think
know.
the almost more interesting thing to look at is that at the point in time where they introduced the current system, I very much understood the necessity of it. Like, the reason from the
Yep.
very get go that we had both starting items and starting skills, and they were mandatory for all characters, was largely because that was one of the major facets of facilitating like build and run diversity when every character was only hard capped to like the 100 base items that they had. But it's kind
Mhm.
of something that I feel is being solved twofold, and that might be why so many players seem to be moving away from skills and enchanted items. For one, the more items we get, the more like naturally diversifying the runs will be because it's just that much
Mhm.
harder to force the same thing. But then the combination of factors where I think what you get from monsters has become more relevant. What upgrade tiers of items you find have has become more relevant. What core you pick on dually is pretty relevant suddenly. What
Yeah.
quests you might have already completed becomes relevant. What enchant did you actually roll becomes relevant. We have all of these like intrinsic things that have started to shape um kind of like that have become the crossroads in our run naturally, where it's
Yeah.
harder and harder to it's like
Yeah, it's like
everyone is
you
being
rather have the crossroads appear later in the game as opposed to at
Mm.
the very start.
And it's also a little bit
Yeah.
like everyone is gently being shepherded into Retro's playstyle, because I always think
I know.
that's
I
like,
love it.
yeah, and I'm super cool with that because it's always been a very explicitly stated design goal of the game is
Mhm.
meant to be played dynamically and fluently. That doesn't mean that like you have to be like you shouldn't it shouldn't mean that you can't try to go for consistent
Yeah.
lines. It just
Yeah.
means that the game should offer incentives to, based on various variables, consider divergences, be they whether you want to run like the slow relic or the burn relic, or big ones like are you in a relic
Yeah.
board or not. Like, these things should come naturally to the point where it's not that we're that's why I used gently shepherd rather than
Yes.
force, Because the idea is that if you make this intuitive and rewarding and how you want to play the game, then you don't need to force people to play it that way. That just becomes you can still try to force specific builds and stuff like that, and I don't think that's ever going to go away. But if you naturally
No.
disincentivize it, you let people who really want to force that still do that. They'll just be less incentivized to do it, causing the majority of the player base to probably, play a bit more dynamically, and it might be kind of for the betterment of everyone, honestly.
Yeah. And I think that like also a lot of it with how you said it'll never go away, and I think that is true that people will try and force things. I think the location of the power of the items I think is really notable. Like this is bringing it back to state of the meta. Like hydraulic press was at bronze and they had to hotfix it to silver because it became it was too easy to force. I wouldn't be surprised if the hotfix we see for some of the quest stuff, it feels weird with the quest thing since you do need to have it early to complete it, but like part of the problem is that people are probably likely having, they don't realize it, is just, well, a lot of the key pieces are available at bronze.
I mean,
So
that's
it's
that's
not
kind of
that hard to
the
force.
that's the cool thing, right? With what we talked about with balancing levers. If you increase the rarity of an item to make it harder to find, you can actually lower the quest thresholds to be a little bit
Yeah, it's
easier to
true.
complete when you find it.
Yeah.
Or vice versa. If you want an item to be common but less forceable, you can make it harder to complete as well.
Yeah, like they could have them be longer at bronze. They could even do something like the time to complete or the number of activations or number of purchases you need to complete the quest goes down as the item ranks up.
Yeah.
So like you could have it so at bronze you have to buy 7 frost items. At silver you only have to buy 5, and at gold plus you only have to buy 4 or whatever. And like
there's all kinds of ways to handle it, but I think that like that's part of it is a lot of it. And Dinosaur and Tank Yankee available at bronze, and like those are like the tentpole things that push you into the Dino build, and then you sit there and you get upset if you don't get the thing that can scale them. But still, say, you can get into them at bronze. No, that was it.
Yeah, I was gonna say that I also do like the fact that for some things they have lowered the rarity. I think
yes,
they might need to like tune the actual balance of railgun, but it always felt a bit crappy how it's this big build around piece that's still distinctly something for the early mid game, which meant that you were forced into this expensive dilemma where hedging for railgun, not knowing if you would find it, was very painful. But finding a railgun and not knowing if you could transition to the board was also painful. So it's kind of like there's just no good choice. So I do like making this distinction, right? Where if you're playing railgun, your intention is usually one of 3 things. You want to just tempo out and win, or you want to convert into a more creative variation of railgun that's more built for the late game. Like, just today, I think Trinet had like a quad battery railgun build. That's certainly one way of making it work on a later day. Or you might even want to transition out of it entirely, which is why it's important to give us.
Sometimes you can pivot to force field from where
right,
railgun
and
pretty smoothly
especially
if you're on
like
crit core. Yeah,
the fact that the hydraulic press is such a viable like universal pivot, but that just lacks a early game, means that there's some convergence here where the same way you do with Keg on Vanessa, you choose how much to hedge the press depending on how good or bad your like momentum is within the current game. If you're at 7-0, you might not care that much at all about hedging, but if you're like 4-3 and you're still playing Railgun, you didn't get Obsidian at like level 10, you're probably like, I might want to hedge something right about now. So I
Mhm.
like that, like more dynamic choices. I also do think
Yeah.
one of the most interesting choices to be made on a railgun board is that there are two cores typically that people associate with railgun, which is crit core and the V core. And out of the
Mhm.
two, in terms of a railgun board, I think crit core is objectively and far superior. Because crit is very hard to solve for dually, and multiplicative scaling is the hardest thing to solve for crit core. You don't really want it to go off faster. There are a lot of items like atomic clock or what have you that can let you make your railgun very fast. But now that it doesn't have multi-strike, if you don't find exactly obsidian, it's hard to make it do a ton of damage in the late game, and crit core solves that. However, crit core can be limited in what other things can actually be played with it. Like, you can probably play like cybersecurity, but it's not really gonna
Yeah.
enable
Okay.
a
Yeah, I was
amazing
gonna say,
like
yeah, like just I think force field is like the natural pivot because it
right.
plays well with crit core, and I mean obviously you have to find defense
hmm
grid, right?
hmm
But that is one like escape path out
But
of
the
railgun
interesting thing
to
then,
10
right,
wins.
is that the regular core is still pretty decent with Railgun. It has distinct synergy by, letting you charge some of your tech items and charge the Railgun itself and all of that stuff. But it opens you up to a much broader spectrum of like late game pivots, since a lot of the things that are good with crit core can also be good with the core, and then it's also even better for stuff like kinetic cannon, for stuff like the nitrogen hammer, anything that really benefits from charging. So you get this cool dynamic choice of, do I want to pick the core that makes my railgun build my board much stronger and try to take that until the very end? Or do I want to pick the slightly worse one, but that gives me way more opportunities down the line? Um, just love choices like that, especially for boards that are somewhat limited to the early mid game, like Railgun. It's fine
Mhm.
to find it at bronze if it's a board that you decently often want to pivot out of. It's kind of what like Duelist Trebuchet.
Yeah. I will also say I'm glad that they finally pulled the trigger and made the diamond version of Railgun have real numbers on it.
Yeah,
Like
Mm,
agreed.
it felt like they were scared to do it for a while. Like they really wanted to have like it was 150, 300, 450, 600, like a flat 150 at each
yeah.
rank. But like I've always said, it doesn't like other cards, it makes sense to have scale at a flat effect. Flat damage doesn't scale into the late game at diamond the same way that like multiplicative or scaling effects do.
Yeah.
So 800 damage at diamond, it's not like you're getting, if you get a diamond item early at this point, you have really high rolled because you found
Yeah.
the gold upgrade in the shop. Like getting to level 13 is not something that just happens fast. So if you have a diamond railgun, it probably should be doing 800 damage. It's not
hmm
like you're getting it early. So
Well, that's part of
even
it
that,
too,
like,
right? Is that level 13 is further into the game than it
yeah, level
was
13 is
the
further in the
last
game. You
time.
need
Yeah,
800 damage by the time you're level 13 is like fair. It's fair at that
absolutely.
point.
Yeah, I agree.
But like they also, to do that, they shifted away the power from the early game where it was very clearly out of line, like 150 at bronze
Yeah,
to
I mean it's still
100.
obnoxious to play against this
And it's
card
it's
at
still it's
silver
still
on day
strong.
1 or whatever when they P1 P2 it
Yeah,
like.
yeah, they get it to
Yeah,
silver at
yeah.
250, and
I think
it gets a second off
we
the cooldown.
could very seriously consider at this point, because I think it's a very big deal, right, that we level up again to 2 on day 1.
Uh-huh.
With level 2 on day 1, we should probably make B1, B2 start showing up at day 2. I always
maybe.
Yeah,
feel
that
like
might be smart.
yeah, all the like
That seems fair. That seems
all
fair.
the most volatile, like disproportionate power spikes is like Tank Yankee is no railgun, but the fact you knock a full second off this item that damages and shields gets kind of silly. You know, it's like now
Yeah.
with Vanessa, you could fit like you could have
I mean, even
the
Silver Grenade on day one is
yeah,
such a
silver
terror.
grenade,
Like,
silver vents with
I just
like the extra space to fit like vents, Soarcid, uh, even seashell, early silver, very scary,
yeah.
life preserver. There's a lot of these items where like it gets real
The jump is
volatile,
wild.
and
But I
twice so
yeah,
with
no,
like enchanted ones, right? Like it's always
yes.
the silver obsidian enchanted Vanessa items. It's like why?
Yeah,
They've done this to
they're
me.
the ones that make me want there to only be income start.
Yeah,
Is
right,
that
right.
because I'm like, oh great, now I'm gonna go and pick Vanessa Enchanted Start, and I'm gonna get like deadly pearl.
I think I
Jellyfish,
lost
yeah.
to like Obsidian Seashell on like day 5 in like my
Yeah,
last.
no, Obsidian Seashells. So like, it's actually very
Mhm.
strong. That is the gold skill start now.
Like
Is
more
Vanessa's
than
Seashell.
once, honestly.
Yeah, but basically I'm just really happy to see, like, looking at the railgun change. I was so happy to see that they're willing to look at these numbers, and they don't have to be so beholden to like
Yeah.
it needs to scale up at the same number at every tier because of quality of life, and it's easier to
And
remember. Like, no, some items need to be weaker in the early game and stronger in the late game.
I think
Like,
it's like twofold too. I mentioned this on I think it was last episode or the one before, but it's the big reason why the exchange felt so healthy for the game is because it really
mhm,
enables much more granularity when it comes to tuning the items for specific rarities. As
yes,
before, you really had to account for the small percentage of the player base that really knew how to maximize XP gain were always going to get these massive power spikes way sooner than the average player.
yeah,
So if you also then made those power spikes completely huge, then the players that
yes,
didn't have that just ended up getting rolled.
hmm
And I think the other thing is I know I've heard the devs in the Discord talk about the fact that they're changing the way they implement enchants on a lot of items, where they're much
yes,
less just looking at the base cooldown, and they've updated their methodology to look more closely at what does the item do in practice. And to a lot
Yeah, the
of
actual
people,
use case as opposed to the
right,
10-second addle.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
I mean, I
to a,
think that they were all put in automatically at first,
yeah,
like,
yeah.
because I think enchants came in pretty late, if I
Yeah,
remember
and
correctly.
that's the thing, right? Like a lot of people are gonna say, like, "Oh, of course they should have been doing that the whole time," which there's
I mean,
some truth
one
to
thing
the
at a time.
sentiment,
Yeah,
but the biggest thing is that is labor intensive, objectively.
yeah,
You have to individually look at all of it instead of just using some kind of rule. And
yeah,
I think it shows a very real commitment to fine tuning balance that they have now openly stated and shown for both enchants and different tiers of rarities that, okay, we've found our footing, the game is kind of in a more
yes,
stable balance cadence, and we have more time to work on the patches, we have more time to spend on other things. And so we think it's really worth it for us to invest this time in
yeah,
fine-tuning these small details. And I think that should be highlighted and
I
appreciated
think having cool
when we do
enchants is
that.
one of the best uses of developer resources. I think like
yeah,
Yeah, for sure.
having like unique enchants or ones that just reflect something flavor wise about the card. Like I
Hmm.
love Deadly Fort and Deadly Iceberg. They're some of my favorites.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, that kind of are interesting because it's like a flagship card. And I don't mean the card. It could be the card literally flagship, but a flagship card like Fort or Ice Club or a flagship could have like cooler enchants because let's be real, that's a card that people are gonna be excited to enchant, right? So it's like
Mhm.
they don't have to have the coolest enchant on light bulb or whatever. That's fine.
How
But
dare you?
Oh, it has a crazy enchant actually. The crit one is bananas.
It actually-
so it actually
okay,
yeah.
great. Well,
It does,
okay,
in fact, have
that's
crazy
cool.
enchants.
You've insulted the entirety of the Lightbulb fan base right now.
Okay.
I'll have you know,
Yeah,
both
yeah,
of
yeah.
us right here.
No, I'm
Yeah.
actually, I love the new light bulb design. I love that Dooley has a chum item that allows him
Yeah.
to play the like small item shop mini game, which is something
Mhm.
that he didn't really have very much access to. But I actually love light bulb. So I'm a
I
big
just
fan of
wanna
light bulb.
Sure,
say,
sure. You're saying that now that the light bulb stands have come out of the woodworks to attack
Yeah,
you. You're
I
just
just
trying
like
to
cool
save
enchants.
face.
I like cool enchants. They're cool. Do them.
so on the topic
I
of
agree.
upgrades finally being balanced, I'm sure a new hero having upgrades as part of her identity won't
yeah.
break this at all. Surely there won't be any weird
We'll
diamond
see.
items on day
that's
6
kind of-
happening.
We'll see
But
how many of her
I-
cards are going to stay the same by the time
Right,
she's
that's
out
kind of
with
the
that.
cool thing.
They might even
right,
abandon
is
that thought.
No, I feel
Yeah.
like I've had this in mind for a long time, that the fact that they're starting to much more closely look at the actual implications of upgrades is such a good sign for Stell, because it means that
Yes.
by
true.
the time she enters the fray and has this as, at least we assume, a relatively central mechanic, then her items should be much more adequately tuned around this being the case, and they should have accounted for how she'll interact with which other hero items are easier or harder to get, and all of those things. So
Yeah. Yes
I
and
love
no.
their
Like
methodology of using pearls and stuff, and like
yeah,
they can test the power of the items before the
Yeah.
hero is released by like dripping them into the game in like in
Mhm.
unreliable forms that are hard to, but they could still internally presumably see the win rate of those items,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So
Yeah.
if you
so-
guys remember when they introduced Mac, they had to nerf all the poison and burn skills and other skills super like for the other heroes were affected by Mac. Like they had to because Mac interacted in a certain way with burn and poison. They kind of had to make those skills worse. So I feel like if a hero has upgrades as part of their core, then that will be hard to balance because the other heroes, like you would have, I don't know how to explain it, but it's like it's gonna affect all the heroes.
Yes.
Is my worry.
But I
of
feel
course it
like
will, but
that's
they'll just have to live in that world. Like
Yeah, and
Sure.
it's also like that's the case for every hero currently. Like every new item they add has to account for how does the possibility of this acceleration ending up on Pygmalion, what does that result in? Any item that's way too powerful to charge with metronome, they have to think about, or no, pendulum, they have to think about how does this affect Mac. Every
Mm-hmm.
item that can potentially charge a core really fast, they have to think about how does that interact with Dooley, and so on and so forth. I feel like absolutely you're completely correct in highlighting that as like the major complexity, but it also feels like it's on that very like dilemma that the Bazaar was founded. Like that kind of
Yeah.
is the game.
I know the designers
Sure.
have gone on record saying it's not a main focus of like how something is going to interact on another character if you happen to get it, if it's an item. Skills and mechanics, I'm sure it's going to be, that's a whole different story.
So one final
like-
note on this topic. I don't know if you guys have faced him yet. You probably have, but the new day 11 boss, I think, which has like the sword of swords and another item, like
Yes.
he's what is he called? I'm blanking currently.
Morgaloth or something.
Morgaloth.
Yeah. Wait, is he named after that guy in the Bazaar? Whatever, that's off tangent. But anyway,
Yes, the answer is yes.
Okay, anyway, so I, for a long time, like in Slay the Spire, in Hearthstone, in all card games, my favorite decks have regularly been the ones where you play cards from other heroes. It's like a
Yeah.
multicolor, like I guess in
Thief
Magic it would be
deck.
like a rainbow. I don't know. It usually it's not
it
that
would be
strong,
like
but
five.
it's fun.
It would be like 5 color in Magic. which is-
Yeah. So seeing that they have introduced monsters that are kind of playing around with that, I really hope that we eventually get either an expansion for a hero or one hero just having part of their identity being like a thief or something. Like you steal items from other heroes. That would be so cool. So I'm just super happy to see that.
Expand it.
Yeah, sure.
let's
Vanessa,
make Vanessa's disguise an archetype. Like, but actually, it sounds like I'm joking.
So
but I
in
mean,
case Tempo's listening, I'm so happy to see that being pushed or at least happening, because I think that is currently unexplored design space that could be really fun, but also potentially very hard to balance, of course.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's all I had to say on that.
Yeah.
All right.
So are we ready to move on to the board of the week? Or
I'll say one note in terms of state of the meta. I want to say, I know like hotfixes, stuff like that happening, yada yada yada, but like I do think one of the key things that I think that things like library and pendulum they're ticking time bombs waiting for good activators, and this was inevitable. And I wonder if we're just going to be circling back to this, or if like the hotfix is going to tackle those in some way.
Yeah, I've heard
Toby said that library is currently the highest win rate item, and that doesn't surprise me at all.
No, I've heard some people mention that they think like, oh, pendulum isn't the problem. You just have to understand that you can't ever give Mac like fast or charging items.
But that's not tenable. That's not tenable. Like that Mac can't have fast charging items ever, or like can't have room for quick items. Like, okay, well, he already had earrings, and now earrings are even more potentially wild.
That was gonna be my point, is that I fully agree with you here, that at some point, you have to look at pendulum being one part of the problem pairing in all of these various pairings throughout the history of Mac being a character for like 3 months. It's not even been that long. And at some point,
I mean, to be fair, like the last pack cards, pack cards, pendulum didn't really go with them all that well. Like Claw is okay with it. Like, that was kind of a pendulum enabler just because it was a multicaster. I mean, what happened, honestly, is that Mac didn't really have access to multicast cards, and now he has, like, 5 new multicast cards, and multicast cards are just inherently strong with pendulum.
And that's what I mean.
You basically could have 2 cards more on one side instead of just one,
2
basically.
Things. I do believe especially pendulum limits design space in it makes it so they can't make certain items for Mac. Like a lot of items, you cannot make them for Mac. And the other thing is, I don't particularly feel like pendulum's effect is that like flavor-wise, like not the item or art, but like the effect itself.
Kind of.
I don't know that has to be a Mac like charging stuff like that. I don't know if that has to be part of Mac's core kit. I don't know what you guys think.
Maybe it could turn it. Don't shoot me. Maybe it could turn into a monster item. Maybe it could be the Lord of the Wastes
like
key
a rare.
That would not be
I completely agree.
Honestly. Especially because a lot of the time the reason you go for Lord of the Wastes even on Mac is to try to hit that one. And it's one of those things too, right? Where like it's exactly. I'm glad you brought up that second point, where I think you can make the argument X thing is bad because it restricts design space, and I think that's like half true, but a lot of the time it kind of isn't. Like, I think Crow's Nest restricts design space, Silencer restricts design space, but obviously
remove them.
It's fair. Like you can have
keep them coming. What else you got?
Get
rid of those.
And my point is mainly going to be you can personally have like subjective feelings on whether or not you like single weapon Vanessa as an archetype. I personally don't really. I very rarely go out of my way to play it. It gets samey pretty quickly. But that aside, I understand the appeal to a lot of players, and I do think a lot of it is cool, where you get to almost feel like you're picking your centerpiece and you can support it in a really meaningful way. It's cool. And at that point, you can make an argument that you're having a trade-off, right? You're restricting design space to enable a meaningful archetype, and everything you do is going to restrict design space in one way or another. So the most meaningful conversation is, Library and Pendulum,
They're so general.
do we really
Well,
feel
I think
like
Pendulum
they...
is really fun, and I think Library is
Yeah.
not. Is that I actually think that like like having those two cards in the same sentence is not they're not the same kind of card. Library is like a hoser card that's also a super combo enabler, which I don't think is good. I actually don't think
Yeah.
it's good to mix like cards that are specifically good against one archetype. I don't think it's good to have those also be like a piece of a combo.
I
Because
completely
then when it
agree. That
actually
was
happens,
like Tank Yankee, great example.
yeah,
I'm so
and
glad they
because
removed
what
that
actually happens
text.
is
I
like
agree.
it just makes it so that combo has an unlosable matchup, no
Yeah,
matter how
yeah,
bad
yeah.
that version of it is. So
Yeah.
like, I don't like that
Library
part
is
of
the
it.
peak offender.
I mean, it was
Yeah,
like
100%.
we'd
Peak
have a
offender.
way more clear-cut argument when it was the original iteration of Pendulum that gave crit and charge. Because
Yeah.
it was very like, why
It's-
do we need it to do both?
Yeah, I was more just mentioning in the sense of like these are cards that are going to artificially elevate anything like with Library, any prominent non-weapon build, it's going to be taken to the moon because that card is
Yeah.
out of line.
I
Even you run it
completely-
with Femur, like that's how broken it was. We run
Yeah.
it in like the weapon build as well, which is so
I think,
Yes.
well, to
bizarre.
be fair, I
Yes.
think that was like one of the cool things. But overall, like, I think it'd be very reasonable. Like, Library strikes me as the kind of thing that we could like somewhat rework, retune, or just move to Diamond. Like, it's kind of like
Yeah,
the
it seems like it
Shipwreck of
needs
Mac,
a
right?
change.
It is a shipwreck robotics factory type of card. I
Mhm.
agree.
And
Yes. Yeah.
but Pendulum, on the other hand, I do kind of like. I mean, either you can do something similar.
Yeah,
to,
no, I
like,
like
the
Pendulum.
problem, yeah, it restricts. The main issue is that it also has a lot of conflicting overlap with, like, we have fiber optics and charging station on Dually already, so you can't give it like the duct tape treatment of like make it go one direction only. You've just made charging station with extra steps.
That was old Catalyst.
Yeah, right. You've made
Or
old
whatever
Yeah,
it
half
was.
a
Catalyst, which is
metronome.
like
The half
Yeah,
the half
half
metronome.
a
That
half
always
a
felt
metronome.
so weird. It was like, why do we have metronome and half metronome? Now
Yeah,
at least we have
yeah.
like, and you know, for a bit we kind of had like banana, and we have like larger banana, and it's a bit like, what are we doing here?
Yeah. Yeah.
And from that perspective, I do potentially like the idea of, well, if we want this to be almost stronger fiber optics, that sounds like a very reasonable, hey, let's make this the Lord of the Wastes loot type
Well,
thing.
yeah, but also like maybe Pendulum is a fun enough card that it's worth the design space restriction. Like,
yeah,
I think
Like,
there's a real argument where that could be true
Mhm.
as well.
I completely
Yeah,
agree.
it's
Even-
It's getting
I-
mostly hung up on Pendulum when I really wanted to throw Library under the bus.
okay, yeah,
I-
we hate libraries, you know.
I feel
Okay.
like
I hate books.
Whoops.
personally, I would argue that I don't think Pendulum is worth it, but it's still one of those where it's like close enough that I think it's like, yeah, you can't conclusively say one way or the other. Even I could be probably convinced otherwise, because it does do a lot of cool things, even if it also
It is fun.
has a lot of asterisks attached to it.
Yeah.
I did also want to, since we have you on currently Retro, this is a very
Yeah.
voluntary question where it
Okay, I
completely
opt
depends on like, yeah, what you think you can say comfortably and stuff. But I know that one of the things that
Oh.
I've had like people ask about the most lately, there's a lot of people are arguing that one of the big reasons we end up in this, like, oh, we have to hotfix every other day scenarios, which is very much the state. That's the real state of the meta, to
Uh-huh.
be quite honest. And people have been calling for a lot more testing. And I know that we have seen some efforts to increase the amount of playtesting that things get before they hit live. And I was just
Uh-huh.
wondering if you have anything in regards to that that you can and or would be comfortable with sharing.
Oh, I'm very comfortable with sharing the fact that no, I was not invited to the test server. No, I'm not on there. I don't have anything to say.
Gotcha.
I'm very comfortable
I mean,
with
I
saying
have
no. I
something-
do not
I
have
have
access
something
to the private
to
test
say
server.
about the testing thing is that okay, look, our topic was meta scaling. Meta scaling cards in particular require way more
Yeah.
testing in terms of time to understand the power of than normal items, because they require
Mhm.
you to play the entire run,
Yeah.
and they require you to play the entire run against realistic opponents in a meta that they don't know what the meta is going to be. So
Oh, for sure.
It's
way harder.
It's not surprising to me when we have things that need to be hotfixed. It's not surprising to me at all, and I think people need to be more reasonable.
I
Because
also think
they've said many times they don't have the amount of people to test, and if they're willing to hotfix things within hours like they did with hydraulic press, they can get all of the data they need in like 1 or 2 hours on live. If they're
I
willing to
think
fix it, who cares? That's my
especially
take.
it is worth mentioning too that I think it's such a big deal of like accounting for the time it takes for information to propagate within the Bazaar, like the game on a meta plane, where on Friday, we made freeze items broken on the quest max stuff, whatever. For the first like day or so, I didn't queue
Yeah.
into it at all. Even on like
I didn't
Saturday,
either.
I did multiple runs. I faced like a few strewn together boards. It's not until like several days later, um, now that
Yeah.
we're like on the tail end. It was like last night I started seeing it a lot more.
An interesting note on that, because like since I record for YouTube and I record like 1 to 2 days in advance, I'll put my videos out today that I recorded like a few days ago, and people are like, "Oh my god, he got so lucky. He didn't run into any freeze max." And I'm like,
Yeah.
"Well, yeah, people, that was right when the change happened. People didn't know yet that it was strong."
I had to go into Ragnar's chat. I had to go into Rawrush's chat, teach them how to play the build, and then they spread it to the.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But okay,
But even then,
like
like-
unironically, there is an aspect to that. Is like people
it takes
see
time
what
for it
good
to
players,
travel. Yes.
Yeah, people see what good players are doing and they copy them, and that's actually
I
like,
think-
Yeah.
that's actually a good
And then
thing.
it spreads
Mhm.
into the game. You'll start,
Yes.
because then you start to see enemies doing it a lot.
Right,
and you're like,
right.
okay,
And
well,
then
I'll copy
it
my
spreads
enemy,
faster and faster.
and then it
and
spreads
But,
and
but and then
then
much more importantly, like it also takes some time for the people learning it to get good at it. Which
Yes,
for
that
like
too.
Oh, yeah.
for a
100%.
regular patch,
Quest
that's a
Mac is
good,
not that
cool
easy.
thing, right? But like especially with the Quest Max stuff, like you could catch
I mean,
me
I
on
played it on
Saturday
super
saying
hard
like,
mode for
"Damn, it's
5
so
days."
nice that people are playing Quest Mac because it's like the easiest matchup I've ever had."
I was gonna say the Quest Mac reminds me the most of Fixer Upper meta, where
Right.
the people who weren't very good at doing Fixer Upper stuff are like, okay, so this goes on my board on day 2, right? Like, and you just get free wins for the first, like 5 days for all the people trying to force it. And I'm like,
Yeah.
right now I'm seeing all these people putting their frost totem on board day 1, day 2, day 3, and I'm like, thank you, keep the free wins coming. Like you're giving me a
Also-
free ticket to the late game where I'll die to the freeze mac instead.
Most people don't even have the items. Like
Exactly,
that's
that
also
too.
an important thing, right?
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
Like I've heard
Yeah.
a lot of like negative takes on the kind of like release cadence of the items to the general player base, but I do like it in a lot in
I
the
like it.
sense of like I remember
love the
when
scramble,
Vanessa's first
actually.
expansion came out, and at the time I wasn't playing a lot of Vanessa, so it actually
Mhm.
took me until like after the items had been hotfixed like twice, I think, is when I started really playing with them. And then
Oh,
I
yeah.
got them
We had
handed
lots
to
of
me in, like,
conversations about them, I remember.
yeah, I got them handed
A
to
lot
me in a
of
nice and
travels.
finely tuned and fairly balanced state where I got to figure out a lot of stuff and do a lot of fun stuff. And I think there is a degree of like being allowed to opt in. Like, do you want to be the Rarish, the Ragnar on the forefront, like figuring things out day 1, hour 1, and trying to just break the meta the fastest? Or are
Mhm.
you more a little bit laid back and you don't mind waiting for the dust to settle and then playing like with the current cadence? I feel like we get a reasonably short period of high intensity volatility, and then we do still get a fairly decent like week and a half of things being
Yeah.
kind of settled. And I think the balance matters a lot, because the people who stream or grind really heavily or just love the game so much they play it a ton, if the calm period is too long, they'll get really bored. But at the same time, like the
Yeah, I love
people,
the mad scramble of the
Right.
patch
I
of the
do.
hot fixes. Like
I love the scramble. I
yeah,
love it.
it's so fun.
I'm
Like
with you.
figuring out what's broken and like
It's-
going to abuse it right away, and like reading the patch notes and trying to interpret what they mean because they're very sometimes cryptic
yeah,
and
Yeah.
I have a
like that to
confession
me
to
is
make.
super fun.
What's up?
I
Sixten?
enjoyed the 6 weeks of Monitor Lizard.
We know. We know.
Yeah.
That's not a.
Yeah,
we know.
okay. Okay.
I'm more
Okay.
I'm a little bit in the middle. Because I have very limited time and energy oftentimes, I like when things have started to calm down but haven't been completely solved yet.
Yes.
That's usually
Yeah.
the like vibe time of you're just jamming out the games, but anything still kinda goes. You're just not entirely fumbling in the dark. Love that part. But
Like day like 5 into a patch, and until the next patch is kind of like, that's where it's nice. Okay,
Yeah,
and then you also have to subtract the last 2 days of the patch. So like
Also, Metal,
day 5
course.
through 12.
for you, that's when you make your tier list. Like for like in terms of like teaching people how to play builds, it's also important to have enough days where those builds actually exist. You know, like
yeah, exactly.
actually.
Oftentimes, my guides and videos like that will drop like a few days before some major changes, because we've had enough time to solve it to a degree, but it's still not so solved that everyone already knows.
I mean, it's always a challenge in this game for any content creator to release stuff that is meta relevant and have it to the viewers in a time frame where they can use the information. I think that it's always going to be a scramble. Right? I was talking to
Yeah.
Goose about this. Like he released, an amazing guide, and then that explained how to play Pig in the early game, and then they like changed XP, and the whole
Yeah.
thing was no
Yeah.
longer relevant. And like the rest of the guide still has tons of amazing information, but it's like the first 20 minutes are incorrect. So it's like
Oh yeah.
it's like there's always going to be this tension, but it's like we even got a comment on one of our videos,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
how can we release the podcast at a time of the week where it's relevant for the listeners. And it's a challenge because we need, as podcast hosts and as players of the game, like I need time to play the game and form my opinions and say, because I want to come on here and say something informed, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like have an opinion that I'm not just completely making up. So
Yeah, because it's gonna get immortalized, and
Yeah,
like,
exactly,
and I'm like, oh, I don't want to like be.
I want to know what I'm talking about when I come
Yeah, I
on
wanna
here.
know
So
what I'm
it's
talking
like
about.
I need time to play the game, and at the same time, Metal needs a few hours to upload the video, and then the viewers
Yeah.
need some hours to listen to
Hold
the
up.
podcast, and by the
and
time
use
all
that info.
happens,
Wait.
Yeah.
yeah.
If this is being immortalized, remove my confession there earlier. I don't want that
Okay.
to
No.
be.
Yeah. No, it was.
Everyone's gonna
It's okay.
know.
We hot fixed it. We hot fixed it.
No, like,
Yeah,
so the
yeah.
thing is,
Everyone agrees
Sixten,
with you now.
You don't
Blade Lizard
realize, but
conceded when he didn't get the core. Like we get
no,
it.
like this whole time, you've actually had a sticky note on the back that said, "I enjoyed 6 months of Monitor Lizard." So
Yeah.
I hate to break it to you, but everyone
You've been
knew.
wearing the Kicks Me sign.
Yeah.
Oh, on that topic, I saw a post where someone said that if Monitor Lizard was a build currently, it would be like unplayable garbage. Like because the game has somehow power crept so much in the last 6 months that Monitor Lizard wouldn't even be like a good build anymore.
I mean, we
Like,
won't.
I
Amelia would
Like,
just
we
dump
don't
it.
need to like get that deep into it. But I will say, I didn't even think Monitor Lizard was that strong back then. I crushed it every time. I was just.
I do
playing
think
the other
at that time
stuff.
the ignition core stuff going on was the more reliable.
Yeah, it was
of the
much
two.
stronger, but people just didn't know. And Monitor Lizard was so prolific that, like, it kind of centered the meta around itself. I think back then we had so much worse like information propagation too.
Oh yeah.
And people were way worse at the game and didn't understand nearly as well how the actual like mechanics of the cards
But
work.
that was
in
like
actuality, yeah.
bar Mac release, which is my highest win rate of all time. Monitor Laser Dually was like a very close second, and I never played Monitor Lizard, and it was like the best I've ever performed in the history of the game.
Mhm.
So yeah, good things, good times, good tidings.
Indeed.
I think
Right.
let's move it to the board of the week.
Okey-dokey.
Before Retro has a surprise, I don't know what his board is. He hasn't shown it. But
there you go.
Uh-oh.
So
I
the-
won't click it just yet, because before
Yeah,
we
yeah.
move to your board that I still haven't seen, it's just
perfect.
hiding in my DMs.
Perfect.
This
I'll
is
delete it.
Walter's submission, our
Oh,
first
yes.
ever day 7 board submission. But
I'm making the claim that this is the strongest ever day 7 build anyone's ever had in the Bazaar.
and I will
This
readily
board would beat
That
any
is
other day
true.
7 board from any past meta.
And I will
That's my-
I think
readily
that could be
believe
true.
you, yeah, and we need to
I
make
believe you.
Walter coolest forever, perpetually. He's now public enemy number 1.
Yep.
Day
He's the
17.
sole reason that we're in the current... The funny part is, it's only half an exaggeration. You're the sole reason we are currently in this meta. You're the sole reason that people are abusing library. You're everything that's wrong with the game.
Yep, you can direct your hate emails to
Yeah. To Walter Coolest at coolguy.com.
Walter.coolest
Yeah.
at Gmail.
Yeah.
That's not a real.
wait.
Okay, that's not a real email address.
You need to
Walter
make
at
that. You need to make
coolest.com.
that email address now.
Yeah,
Actually.
Walter at coolest.com.
Get on it. This is all your future marketing.
Yeah, I'm setting
But
it up.
Dark Lord Walter,
yeah,
ruler of day 7.
For any audio only listeners, we have already multicasting Ice Frost Totem Man, whatever, the angry spiky guy. We have the blank slate, our good old tabula rasa, with earrings, with black eyes, with reminder, day 7, Diamond Library, Rebirth, and Bonk. So yeah, how does it feel to be the worst human being on the planet?
It was so fun. Like, to be honest, my Mac opponent, you can see him in the screenshot. He was also playing Permafreeze. 0 regrets. There's, I don't feel bad at all. Like, come on, I just had a better version of the same. I had a better version of the same build. Get owned. Like, what is the? There's no ethical. There's no ethical issue here.
I did have
Exactly.
like a day 4 gold railgun yesterday. That one felt pretty ethical too.
That's pretty gross too. Like,
It was one of the first
Beautiful.
times that
Okay,
I've ever
so-
been playing for tempo, and I just stopped pressing relax because I was like, no, you're not beating me.
How is the Retro gonna beat this board? Like, I feel like we should have done them in the other order because this is a very hard thing to follow up.
It's
Or
a
is it?
hard left turn.
Okay.
So I didn't have a whole lot of time. I got notified relatively recently that I was going to be on the podcast. The server was out. The server
send it
patch came
again.
out
I'll get it
very
up
recently.
and I'll slide it on as we talk.
So that's my preamble. For
oh my god!
I'm submitting a board from the past. Literally, this is a board that
Oh.
you're gonna have to see it because it's just
to see it to believe it. Here you go.
And even when you see it, you won't believe it. Because this is my submission for the most Giga Chad 10-win perfect victory in the Bazaar.
Chad, you're actually completely correct.
Yeah, I'm gonna
I love this.
do the
I love
honors
this.
here. Tell the viewers what items were on your board at day 10 with a perfect win.
So on the left, we have a fiery lighter that only has 6 burn on it, even though it's fiery. Just cuz. then a matchbox, then a silver dock lines, and then a silver harpoon gun, a diamond life preserver, and a
Please tell me
silver
this is a
astrolabe.
normal.
No. This was not a normal.
This is a ranked
This-
game, okay.
This was a ranked game. It is this. I can't tell you what patch this was on. It was a bit ago, but I just had to share it because I saw it when I was looking through my old 10 wins, and it just made me so happy to see this.
Amazing.
Yeah, I
It's
think
so
truly
There's
any
four skills. Four skills.
Yep, the 4 skills total, just like
and
Four
one of
total
them
skills.
one of them does
The fi-
like 2 of them do
Yep.
literally nothing basically.
I know.
You have 2 skills.
Yeah,
You have
I have
White
2
Flame
skills.
and you have Conflagration, and that is it.
Yeah, and the worst hotspot of all time.
The worst hotspot
I
of all
forgot
time.
harpoon is even an item in the game. Like I forgot
I
Vanessa's
know.
destroy as well. That's crazy.
Yeah,
it truly is like you picked an opposite screenshot. I actually think it's so funny.
yeah.
Like you picked the worst ever perfect.
The worst 10 win perfect that's
Yeah.
ever happened is right here.
It's beautiful. It's cool. Honestly, it shows you the power of tempo, right? It actually
Yeah.
there is something to it, even though obviously like it's ugly to look at in a it's
Yeah,
it's ugly,
no,
it's ugly
it makes me
beautiful.
sad to see, but it makes me very happy to see.
Yeah, because it's like you must have played the run well, even though your
Yeah.
items are bad, and that's what's cool about it.
I will say,
really
like,
dig it.
the past Walter Coolest, the cooler Walter Coolest would have sent me a board like this. What happened to you, man?
I assume you didn't record this, but
Oh,
surely you
no,
must have
no.
felt.
Yeah, this one was not recorded, which
This could be your next
Yeah.
video.
it could have been a good
OP.
one. Whatever
Is
you do, do
Astrolabe
not upgrade
the
your
answer to the
astrolabe.
meta?
Whatever you do, do
Truly.
not upgrade your astrolabe
Is
from
silver
silver. It's very
Astrolabe
important.
the meta breaker?
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
beautiful.
so yeah, there's
Well, speaking of things that you record, why don't we go ahead and hit people with the socials at this point? Retro, where can they find more of you?
that. YouTube.com/Retromation for Bazaar
Um,
videos.
And you currently, just in case anyone's wondering, do not stream on Twitch. It's just the YouTube videos.
I would like to. I just, especially because I'm also uploading other stuff alongside the Bazaar now a little bit. I really don't feel like I have time, but I would like to do that. It's fun. It's fun to stream live too. But currently no, but Retromation on Twitch as well. Go follow. You'll get notified if I ever change my mind.
Very cool. And Walter, what about you and your evil misdeeds?
I'm in the
Where are they
chat.
found?
You know the deal. I'm in the chat.
Yeah. What about you, Sixten?
You can find me at Twitch and YouTube to Sixten. In a week from now or so, I will be recording Bazaar Jeopardy with a few contestants. So that should be fun. I'm still working on the trivia questions, but yeah, that's something I've been meaning to do for a long time. And yeah, that's where you
Am
can
I
find
getting
me.
to be a contestant?
I mean, I wanted you to be like a co-host, but you can be a contestant as well. Like I don't
We
know.
can do
it's-
like
I'll do the co-host. I don't mind being the co-host.
we can
Yeah.
we
I
can
wanna
do
be a
a
contestant.
future like Bazaar podcast guest like special episode. It's just us.
Yeah, I'll never forgive you if I'm not a contestant. Sixten,
True.
just so
Okay,
you know.
you're invited as well at Retro, but like
Okay, great.
I'm telling you, these questions are not easy. Like I have, there are some
Good.
deep cuts.
You're talking
okay,
to some
anyway.
legit nerds in here. Like I'm sure we're prepared for hard questions. Like I know things about
Okay,
this
I
game.
can tease
know-
one question. Do you remember what the original text on Railgun was?
No, but is the question like we have to give you the full original text? That's not
No,
how
just
Jeopardy is.
okay. The gist of it. Okay, like not
Okay,
literally, but gist of it.
No,
Well,
okay, I got
originally it wasn't even in the game. First of all, so the
Mm.
original text was non-existent. Gotcha.
Gotcha there. That I don't even
Yeah,
remember
okay.
the current text on Railgun.
No, but that's like the 5,000 points, whatever, like the final question of changed items is one of the categories.
It was like when you use the core or array, charge this a second or something.
Yeah. When you use the array.
No, that was the changed version. The original was literally, it had no text, I think. It was just a fat big item, I think.
Oh, yeah.
So
like at first it was just a big bonk. Yeah.
Yes.
But like,
yes, exactly.
But that version only existed for like a couple patches. Like,
yeah, but it did exist. Like,
I know.
This is why. Anyway.
So I win. The text was none. I was right.
Ah, true.
I get the
you
point.
were right. Yes,
I get
you get a point there. Yeah, okay. That's a teaser for basically next week.
And it's a teaser for how I'm going to win.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh,
what about you, Metal? Where can people find you?
I stream somewhat sporadically on twitch.tv/MetallFenix with 2 L's and an F, same as the name on the screen. I had very much been intending to stream over this weekend when the plague got to me, unfortunately, but we will try again in the future, and maybe this time I will not have the plague and therefore will be able to stream. I also upload to YouTube, MetallFenix there as well, same spelling. I mostly focus on guides and educational content. I have some ideas for like smaller guides that I intend to do, and then obviously since Dooley is the only remaining hero I haven't covered in a guide yet, and I have been playing him a lot, my intention is to do some kind of Dooley overview at some point in the future, but I'll need to...
You have the potential to do the funniest thing, which is release a Stell guide before Dooley.
Oh, that would be... Yeah, actually. You're giving me all the good ideas here. But that's what I'm usually up to. We've got a Discord in the description as well, where you can get notifications for separate ones for my Twitch streams, my YouTube videos, and whenever we upload episodes of this podcast, whenever I remember to ping the roll. But you can come chat with me there if you want to. And with all that said and done, thank you everyone who listened all the way to the end. We will be back next week with another guest. As per usual, we have someone quite exciting lined up. It's going to be another fun episode, I think. As I mentioned at the start, you can find us on YouTube, on Spotify, on Apple Podcast, or via RSS feed for your podcast listening app of choice. And I hope that wherever you are, you have a wonderful morning, day, evening, or night, and that perhaps we will see you in the next one.